Shiva Trilogy 2. The Secret of the Nagas. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Shiva is truth. Shiva is beauty. Shiva is the masculine. Shiva is the feminine. Shiva is a Suryavanshi. Shiva is a Chandravanshi. Before the beginning, the boy was running as fast as his feet could carry him, the frost-bitten toe sending shards of icy pain up his leg. The woman's plea kept ringing in his ears. "Help me! Please help me!" He refused to slow down, sprinting towards his village, and then he was yanked effortlessly by a large hairy man. He was dangling in the air, desperately trying to get a foothold. The boy could hear the monster's sickening laugh as he toyed with him. Then the other grotesque arm spun him around and held him tight. The boy was shocked into stillness. The body was that of the hairy monster, but the face was of the beautiful woman he had just fled away from moments ago. The mouth opened, but the sound that emanated was not a mellifluous feminine one, but a blood-curdling roar. "You enjoyed this, didn't you? You enjoyed my distress at being tortured, didn't you? You ignored my pleas, didn't you? Now this face will haunt you for the rest of your life." Then a grotesque arm holding a short sword came up from nowhere and decapitated the gorgeous head. "No!" screamed the little boy, snapping out of his dream. He looked around his straw bed, disoriented. It was late evening. A little bit of sunshine had made its way into the otherwise dark hut. A small fire was dying out near the door. It suddenly burst into flames with a fresh breath of oxygen as a person rushed into the tiny room. "Shiva, what happened? Are you all right, my son?" The boy looked up completely bewildered. He felt his mother's hand wrap itself around him and pull his tired head down to her bosom. He heard her soothing voice, sympathetic and understanding. "It's all right, my child. I'm here. The boy felt the fear release from his taut body as his eyes shed long-held back tears. "What is it, my son? The same nightmare?" The boy shook his head. The tears turned into an angrier deluge. "It's not your fault. What could you have done, son? He was 3 times larger than you. A grown man." The boy didn't say anything, but stiffened. The mother continued to gently run her hand over his face, wiping the tears away. "You would have been killed." The boy suddenly jerked back. "Then I should have been killed. I deserved it." The mother was shocked into silence. He was a good son. He had never raised his voice at her before. Never. She quickly set this thought aside as she reached out to soothe his face. "Don't say that again, Shiva. What would happen to me if you died?" Shiva curled his small fist, banging it against his forehead. He kept at it till his mother pulled his fist away. An angry reddish-black mark had formed right between his eyebrows. The mother held his arms down again, pulling him towards her. Then she said something her son was not prepared to hear. "Listen, my child. You yourself had said that she didn't fight back. She could have reached for his knife and stabbed him, couldn't she?" The son didn't say anything. He just nodded. "Do you know why she didn't do that?" The boy looked up at his mother, curious. "Because she was practical. She knew she would probably be killed if she fought back." Shiva continued to stare blankly at his mother. The sin was being committed against her, and yet she did what she could to stay alive, not fight back. His eyes didn't waver for one instant from his mother's face. Why is it wrong for you to be as pragmatic and want to stay alive? The boy started sobbing again as some sense of comfort seeped silently into him. Chapter 1. The Strange Demon. Sati! Screamed Shiva as he rapidly drew his sword and started sprinting towards his wife, pulling his shield forward as he ran. She will run into a trap! Stop! Yelled Shiva, picking up his pace as he saw her dash into a cluster of trees alongside the road leading to the Ram Janmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya. Sati was totally focused on chasing the retreating hooded naga, her sword drawn and held far from her body like a seasoned warrior with her prey in sight. It took a few moments for Shiva to catch up with Sati, to ascertain that she was safe. As she continued to give chase, Shiva's focus shifted to the naga. He was shocked. How did that dog move so far ahead? The naga, showing surprising agility, was effortlessly navigating between the trees and undulating ground of the hillside, picking up pace. Shiva remembered battling with the naga at the Brahma temple at Meru when he had met Sati for the first time. His slow leg movements at the Brahma temple were just a battle strategy. Shiva flipped his shield, clipping it onto his back to get room to run faster. Sati was keeping pace to his left. Sati suddenly made a grunting sound and pointed to the right, to a fork in the path that was coming up. Shiva nodded. They would split up and try to cut off the naga from opposite ends on the narrow ridge ahead. Shiva dashed to his right with a renewed burst of speed, sword at the ready. Sati stayed her course behind the naga, running equally hard. The ground beneath Shiva's feet on the new path had evened out and he managed to cover the distance rapidly. He noticed that the naga had pulled his shield into his right hand, the wrong hand for defense. Shiva frowned. Quickly coming up to the naga's right, with Sati still some distance away, Shiva reached with his left hand, drew a knife and flung it at the naga's neck. A stunned Shiva then saw a magnificent maneuver that he hadn't imagined possible. Without turning to look at the knife, or even breaking a step, the naga pulled his shield forward in the path of the knife. With the knife safely bouncing off the shield, the naga effortlessly let the shield clip to his back, maintaining his pace. Shiva gaped in awe, his speed slackening. He blocked the knife without even looking at it. Who the hell is this man? Sati meanwhile had maintained her pace, edging closer to the naga as Shiva ran in from the other trail onto the path that the naga was on. Seeing Sati cross the narrow bridge, Shiva picked up speed, closing in on his wife. Because of the steep angle of the sloping ridge, he could see the naga farther ahead, reaching the wall at the bottom of the hill. The wall protected the Ram Janmabhoomi temple at the base from animal attacks and trespassers. The height of the wall gave Shiva hope. There was no way the naga could jump over it. He would have to climb, giving Sati and him the crucial seconds needed to catch up and mount an attack. The naga came to the same realization as well. As he neared the wall, he pirouetted on his heels, hands reaching to his sides, drawing out two swords. The sword in his right hand was a traditional long sword glinting in the evening sun. The one in his left, a short sword with a strange double blade mounted on a central pivot at the hilt. Shiva pulled his shield forward as he neared the naga. Sati attacked the naga from his right. The naga swung the long sword hard, forcing Sati to step back. With Sati on the back foot, the naga swerved with his left hand making Shiva duck to avoid a strike. As the Naga's sword swept safely away, Shiva jumped high and struck down from his height, a blow almost impossible to defend if the opponent is not holding a shield. The Naga, however, effortlessly stepped back, avoiding the strike, while thrusting forward with his short sword, putting Shiva on the back foot. The Nilkant had to quickly swing his shield up to deflect the blow. Sati again moved forward, her sword forcing the Naga back. Reaching behind with her left hand, she pulled out a knife and threw it. The Naga bent his head at the exact moment, letting the knife sail harmlessly into the wall. Shiva and Sati were yet to get a single strike on the Naga, but he was progressively being forced to retreat. It was a matter of time before he would be pinned against the wall. By the holy lake, I finally have him! And then the Naga swung ferociously with his left hand. The sword was too short to reach Shiva, and it appeared to be a wasted maneuver. Shiva pushed forward, confident he would strike the Naga on his torso. But the Naga swung back, this time his thumb pressing a lever on the pivot of the short sword. One of the twin blades suddenly extended beyond the length of the other, doubling the reach of the sword. The blade cut Shiva on his shoulder. Its poisoned edge sent a jolt of electricity through his body, immobilizing him. "Shiva!" screamed Sati as she swung down on the sword in the Naga's right hand, hoping to knock the blade out. Moments before the impact, the Naga dropped his long sword, causing Sati to lurch, her sword slipping out of her hand as she struggled to regain her balance. "No!" screamed Shiva, helpless on his back, unable to move. He had noticed what Sati had forgotten. The knife Sati had flung at the Naga when he had been discovered hiding behind a tree at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple was tied to his right hand. The Naga swiped with his right hand at the falling Sati's abdomen. Sati realized her mistake too late. But the Naga pulled his hand back at the last moment. What would have been a lethal blow turned into a surface wound, running a trickle of blood. The Naga jabbed Sati hard with his left elbow, breaking her nose and knocking her down. With both his enemies immobilized, the Naga quickly flicked his long sword up with his right foot. He swung both his weapons into his scabbard, eyes still on Shiva and Sati. The Naga then jumped high, holding the top of the wall behind him with his hands. "Sati!" screamed Shiva, rushing towards his wife as the poison released its stranglehold. Sati was clutching her abdomen. The Naga frowned, for the wound was just a surface nick. Then his eyes flashed wide. "She's carrying a baby." The Naga crunched his immense stomach, pulling his legs up in one smooth motion, soaring over the wall. "Press tight," shouted Shiva, expecting a deep gash. Shiva breathed easy when he realized that it was a minor wound, though the blood loss and the knock on Sati's nose was causing him worry. Sati looked up, blood running down her nose and her eyes ablaze with fury. She picked up her sword and growled, "Get him." Shiva turned around, picking up his sword and pushing it into his scabbard as he reached the wall. He clambered quickly over. Sati tried to follow. Shiva landed on the other side on a crowded street. He saw the Naga at a far distance, still running hard. Shiva started sprinting after the Naga, but he knew the battle was already lost. He was too far behind. He now hated the Naga more than ever, the tormentor of his wife, the killer of his brother, and yet, deep inside, he marveled at the sheer brilliance of the Naga's martial skills. The Naga was running towards a horse tied outside a shop. In an inconceivable movement, he leapt up high, his right hand stretched out. As the Naga landed smoothly on the top of the horse, the knife in his right hand sleekly cut the reins, freeing the tethered horse. The rearing of the startled horse had caused the reins to fly back. The Naga effortlessly caught them in his left hand. Instantly, he kicked the horse, whispering in the animal's ear. The horse sprang swiftly to the Naga's word, breaking into a gallop. A man came hurtling out of the shop, screaming loudly, "Stop! Thief! That's my horse!" The Naga, hearing the commotion, reached into the folds of his robe and threw something back with tremendous force while continuing to gallop. The force of the blow caused the horseman to stagger, falling flat on his back. "By the holy lake!" shouted Shiva, sprinting towards what he thought was a grievously injured man. As he reached the horseman, he was surprised to see him get up slowly, rubbing his chest in pain, cursing loudly. "May the fleas of 1,000 dogs infest that bastard's armpits." "Are you all right?" asked Shiva as he examined the man's chest. The horseman looked at Shiva, scared into silence at seeing his blood-streaked body. Shiva bent down to pick up the object that the Naga had thrown at the horseman. It was a pouch, made of the most glorious silk he had ever seen. Shiva opened the pouch tentatively, expecting a trap. But it contained coins. He pulled one out, surprised to see that it was made of gold. There were at least 50 coins. He turned in the direction that the Naga had ridden. What kind of a demon is he? He steals the horse and then leaves enough gold to buy 5 more. "Gold?" whispered the horseman softly as he snatched the pouch from Shiva. "It's mine." Shiva didn't look up, still holding one coin, examining its markings. "I need one." The horseman spoke gingerly, for he did not want to battle a man as powerful looking as Shiva. "But—" Shiva snorted in disgust. He pulled out 2 gold coins from his own pouch and gave it to the horseman, who, thanking his stars for a truly lucky day, quickly escaped. Shiva turned back and saw Sati resting against the wall, holding her head up, pressing her nose hard. He walked up to her. "Are you all right?" Sati nodded in response. Dried blood smeared on her face. "Yes, your shoulder. It looks bad." "It looks worse than it feels. I am fine, don't worry." Sati looked into the direction that the Naga had ridden off. What did he throw at the horseman? "A pouch full of this," said Shiva as he showed the coin to Sati. "He threw gold coins?" Shiva nodded. Sati frowned and shook her head. She took a closer look at the coin. It had the face of a strange man with a crown on his head. Strange because, unlike a Naga, he had no deformities. "He looks like a king of some kind," said Sati, wiping some blood off her mouth. "But look at these odd markings," said Shiva as he flipped the coin. It had a small symbol of a horizontal crescent moon, but the bizarre part was the network of lines running across the coin. 2 crooked lines joined in the middle in the shape of an irregular cone, and then they broke up into a spidery network. "I can understand the moon, but what do these lines symbolize?" asked Sati. "I don't know," admitted Shiva, but he did know one thing clearly. His gut instinct was unambiguous. Find the Nagas. They are your path to discovering evil. Find the Nagas. Sati could almost read her husband's mind. "Let's get the distraction out of the way then." Shiva nodded at her. "But first, let's get you to Ayurvati." "You need her more," said Sati. You have nothing to do with our fight, asked a startled Daksha. I don't understand, my lord. You led us to our greatest victory, and now we have to finish the job. The evil Chandravanshi way of life has to end, and these people have to be brought to our pure Suryavanshi ways. But your highness, said Shiva with polite firmness, shifting his bandaged shoulder slightly to relieve the soreness. I don't think they are evil. I understand now that my mission is different. Dilipa, sitting to the left of Daksha, was thrilled. Shiva's words were a balm to his soul. Sati and Parvateshwar to Shiva's right were quiet. Nandi and Veerbhadra stood farther away, on guard but listening in avidly. The only one as angry as Daksha was Bhagirath, the crown prince of Ayodhya. We don't need a certificate from a foreign barbarian to tell us what is obvious. We are not evil, said Bhagirath. Quiet, hissed Dilipa. You will not insult the Nilkant. Turning towards Shiva with folded hands, Dilipa continued. Forgive my impetuous son, my lord. He speaks before he thinks. You said your mission is different. How can Ayodhya help? Shiva stared at a visibly chaffing Bhagirath before turning towards Dilipa. How do I find the Nagas? Startled and scared, Dilipa touched his Rudra pendant for protection as Daksha looked up sharply. My lord, they are pure evil, said Daksha. Why do you want to find them? You have answered your question, your highness, said Shiva. He turned towards Dilipa. I don't believe you are allied with the Nagas, but there are some in your empire who are. I want to know how to reach those people. My lord, said Dilipa, swallowing hard, it is rumored that the king of Branga consorts with the dark forces. He would be able to answer your questions, but the entry of any foreign person, including us, is banned in that strange but very rich kingdom. Sometimes I actually think that the Brangas pay tribute to my empire only to keep us from entering their land, not because they are scared of being defeated by us in battle. You have another king in your empire. How is that possible? Asked a surprised Shiva. We aren't like the obsessive Suryavanshis. We don't insist on everyone following one single law. Every kingdom has the right to its own king, its own rules, and its own way of life. They pay Ayodhya a tribute because we defeated them in battle through the great Ashwamedh Yajna. Horse sacrifice. Yes, my lord, continued Dilipa. The sacrificial horse travels freely through any kingdom in the land. If a king stops the horse, we battle, defeat, and annex that territory. If they don't stop the horse, then the kingdom becomes our colony and pays us tribute, but is still allowed to have its own laws. So we are more like a confederacy of allied kings rather than a fanatical empire like Meluha. Mind your words, you impudent fool, ranted Daksha. Your confederacy seems a lot like extortion to me. They pay you tribute because if they don't, you will attack their lands and plunder them. Where is the royal dharma in that? In Meluha, being an emperor does not just give you the right to receive tribute, but it also confers the responsibility to work for the good of all the empire's subjects. And who decides what is good for your subjects? You. By what right? People should be allowed to do whatever they wish. Then there will be chaos, shouted Daksha. Your stupidity is even more apparent than your immoral values. Enough, asserted Shiva, struggling to tame his irritation. Will both your highnesses please desist? Daksha looked at Shiva in surprised anger, seeing a much more confident Shiva not just accepting, but living his role as a Nilkant. Daksha's heart sank. He knew that fulfilling his father's dream of a member of their family being emperor of all India and bringing the Suryavanshi way of life to all its citizens was becoming increasingly remote. He could defeat the Swadweepans in battle due to his army's superior tactics and technology, but he did not have enough soldiers to control the conquered land. For that, he needed the faith that the Swadweepans had in the Nilkant. If the Nilkant didn't go along with his way of thinking, his plans were bound to fail. Why do you say that the Brangas are allied with the Nagas? Asked Shiva. I can't say for sure, my lord, said Dilipa, but I am going on the rumors that one has heard from traders in Kashi. It is the only kingdom in Swadweep that the Brangas deign to trade with. Furthermore, there are many refugees from Branga settled in Kashi. Refugees? Asked Shiva. What are they fleeing from? You said Branga was a rich land. There are rumors of a great plague that has struck Branga repeatedly, but I'm not quite certain. Very few people can be certain about what goes on in Branga. But the king of Kashi would certainly have better answers. Should I summon him here, my lord? No, said Shiva, unsure whether this was another wild goose chase or whether the Brangas actually had something to do with the Nagas. Sati suddenly piped up as a thought struck her and turned towards Dilipa. Her voice was nasal due to the bandage on her nose. Forgive me, your highness, but where exactly is Branga? It is far to the east, Princess Sati, where our revered river Ganga meets their holy river which comes in from the northeast, Brahmaputra. Shiva startled as he realized something. He turned to Sati, smiling. Sati smiled back. They aren't lines, they are rivers. Shiva reached into his pouch and pulled out the coin he had recovered from the Naga and showed it to Dilipa. Is this a Branga coin, your highness? Yes, my lord, answered a surprised Dilipa. That is King Chandraketu on one side and a river map of their land on the other. But these coins are rare. The Brangas never sent tribute in coins, only in gold ingots. Dilipa was about to ask where Shiva got the coin from, but was cut off by the Nilkant. How quickly can we leave for Kashi? This is good, smiled Shiva, handing the chilam to Veerbhadra. I know, smiled Veerbhadra. The grass is much better here than in Meluha. The Chandravanshis certainly know how to savor the finer things in life. Shiva smiled. The marijuana was working its magic on him. The two friends were on a small hill outside Ayodhya, enjoying the evening breeze. The view was stunning. The gentle slope of the grassy hill descended into a sparsely forested plain which ended in a sheer cliff at a far distance. The tempestuous Sarayu, which had cut through the cliff over many millennia, flowed down south, rumbling passionately. The sun setting gently beyond the horizon completed the dramatic beauty of the tranquil moment. I guess the emperor of Meluha is finally happy, smiled Veerbhadra, handing the chilam back to Shiva. Shiva winked at Veerbhadra before taking a deep drag. He knew Daksha was unhappy about his changed stance on the Chandravanshis, and as he himself did not want any distractions while searching for the Nagas, he had hit upon an ingenious compromise to give Daksha a sense of victory and yet keep Dilipa happy as well. Shiva had decreed that Daksha would henceforth be known as Emperor of India. His name would not only be taken first during prayers at the royal court at Devagiri, but also at Ayodhya. Dilipa in turn would be known as Emperor of Swadweep within the Chandravanshi areas and the brother of the emperor in Meluha. His name would be taken after Daksha's in court prayers in both Devagiri and Ayodhya. Dilipa's kingdom would pay a nominal tribute of 100,000 gold coins to Meluha, which Daksha had pronounced would be donated to the Ram Janmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya. Thus, Daksha had at least one of his dreams fulfilled, being Emperor of India. Content Daksha had returned to Devagiri in triumph. The ever pragmatic Dilipa was delighted that despite losing the war with the Suryavanshis, for all practical purposes, he retained his empire and his independence. "We leave for Kashi in a week?" asked Veerbhadra. Hmm, good. I'm getting bored here. Shiva smiled, handing the chilam back to Veerbhadra. "This Bhagirath seems like a very interesting fellow." "Yes, he does." Veerbhadra took a puff. "What have you heard about him?" "You know," said Veerbhadra, "Bhagirath was the one who had thought of taking that contingent of 100,000 soldiers around our position at Dharmakhet. The attack from the rear, that was brilliant. May have worked too, but for the valor of Drapaku. It would certainly have worked if Bhagirath's orders had been followed to the T." "Really?" asked Shiva, smoking. "I have heard Bhagirath wanted to take his army in the quiet of the night through a longer route that was farther away from the main battleground. If he had done that, we would not have discovered the troop movement. Our delayed response would have ensured that we would have lost the war." "So what went wrong?" "Apparently, the war council didn't want to meet at night when Bhagirath called them. Why in the name of the holy lake wouldn't they meet urgently? They were sleeping." "You're joking." "No, I'm not," said Veerbhadra, shaking his head. "And what is worse, when they did meet in the morning, they ordered Bhagirath to stick close to the valley between Dharmakhet and our position, helping us discover their movement." "Why the hell did the war council make such a stupid decision?" asked a flabbergasted Shiva. "Apparently, Bhagirath is not trusted by his father, and therefore not by most Swadeepan kings or generals either. They believed he would have taken the soldiers, escaped to Ayodhya, and declared himself emperor." "That's ridiculous. Why does Dilipa not trust his own son?" "Because he believes Bhagirath thinks he is a fool and a terrible emperor." "I am sure Bhagirath doesn't actually think that." "Well, from what I have heard," smiled Veerbhadra as he junked out the ash from the chilam, "Bhagirath actually does think so of his father, and he is not far from wrong, is he?" Shiva smiled. "And then to make matters worse," continued Veerbhadra, "the entire fiasco was blamed on Bhagirath. It was said that because he took 100,000 soldiers away, they lost the war." Shiva shook his head, saddened to see an intelligent man being rubbished by the idiots surrounding him. "I think he is a capable person whose wings have been clipped." The tranquil moment was suddenly shattered by a loud scream. Shiva and Veerbhadra looked up to see a rider galloping away, while his companion, lagging far behind, was screeching loudly, "Help! Somebody help Prince Bhagirath!" Bhagirath had lost control of his speeding horse and was hurtling towards the cliff, a near certain death. Shiva jumped onto his horse and charged towards him with Veerbhadra in tow. It was a long distance, but the gentle slope helped Shiva and Veerbhadra make up the expanse quickly. Shiva rode in an arc to intercept Bhagirath's horse. A few minutes later, Shiva was galloping along Bhagirath's path. He was impressed that Bhagirath seemed calm and focused despite facing a life-threatening situation. Bhagirath was pulling hard on his reins, trying to slow his horse down, but his action agitated the horse even further. It picked up more speed. "Let the reins go!" shouted Shiva over the loud rumble of the threateningly close Sarayu River. "What?" screamed Bhagirath. All his training told him letting the reins go was the stupidest thing to do when a horse was out of control. Trust me, let it go. Bhagirath would rather explain it to himself as fate guiding him towards the Nilkant. At this moment, his instinct told him to forget his training and trust this barbarian from Tibet. Bhagirath let go. Much to his surprise, the horse immediately slackened. Shiva rode in close, so close that he could almost whisper into the animal's ear. Then he began to sing a strange tune. The horse gradually started calming down and reducing its speed to a canter. The cliff was coming close, very close. Shiva, warned Veerbhadra, the cliff is a few hundred meters away. Shiva noted the warning, matching the pace of his horse with Bhagirath's. The prince kept his control, staying on the horse while Shiva kept singing. Slowly but surely, Shiva was gaining control. It was just a few meters before the cliff that Bhagirath's horse finally came to a halt. Bhagirath and Shiva immediately dismounted as Veerbhadra rode in. Damn, said Veerbhadra, peering towards the cliff. That was too close. Shiva looked at Veerbhadra before turning towards Bhagirath. Are you all right? Bhagirath kept staring at Shiva before lowering his eyes in shame. I am sorry for putting you through so much trouble. Bhagirath turned to his horse, hitting his face hard for embarrassing him. It's not the horse's fault, shouted Shiva. Bhagirath turned back to Shiva, frowning. Shiva walked towards Bhagirath's horse, gently cradling its face, almost like it was a child being punished unfairly. Then he carefully pulled its reins out, signaling to Bhagirath to come closer, and showed him the nail buried in the leather close to the horse's mouth. Bhagirath was shocked. The inference was obvious. Shiva pulled the nail out, handing it to Bhagirath. Somebody doesn't like you, my friend. Meanwhile, Bhagirath's companion had caught up with them. My prince, are you all right? Bhagirath looked towards his companion. Yes, I am. Shiva turned towards the man. Tell Emperor Dilipa his son is an exceptional rider. Tell him that the Nilkant has yet to see a man with greater control over an animal, even when the odds were stacked so desperately against him. Tell him the Nilkant requests the honor of Prince Bhagirath accompanying him to Kashi. Shiva knew that for Dilipa this would not be a request but an order. This was probably the only way of keeping Bhagirath safe from the unknown threat to his life. The companion immediately went down on his knees. As you command, my lord. Bhagirath stood dumbfounded. He had come across people who plotted against him, people who took credit for his ideas, people who sabotaged him. But this was unique. He turned to his companion. Leave us. The man immediately rode away. I have experienced such kindness from only one person up until now, said Bhagirath, his eyes moist. And that is my sister, Anandamayi. But blood justifies her action. I don't know how to react to your generosity, my lord. By not calling me lord, smiled Shiva. That is one order I would request you to allow me to refuse, said Bhagirath, his hands folded into a respectful namaste. I will follow any other order you give, even if it is to take my own life. Now don't get so dramatic. I am not about to ask you to commit suicide right after having worked strenuously to save your life. Bhagirath smiled softly. What was it you sang to my horse, my lord? Sit with me over a chilam sometime, and I will teach you. It will be my honor to sit at your feet and learn, my lord. Don't sit at my feet, my friend, sit beside me. The sound carries a little better there. Bhagirath smiled as Shiva patted him on the shoulder. Chapter 2 Sailing Down the Sarayu. Tell Princess Anandamayi said Parvateshwar to the captain of the women's guard at Anandamayi's palace entrance. "That General Parvateshwar is waiting outside. She had told me she was expecting you, General," said the captain, bowing low. "May I request you to wait a moment while I go and check on her?" As the captain walked into Anandamayi's chamber, Parvateshwar turned around. Shiva had made him in charge for the expedition of Kashi. Shiva knew if he left the organization to one of Ayodhya's administrators, they would probably be debating the mode of transport for the next 3 years. Parvateshwar, with his typical Suryavanshi efficiency, had seen to the arrangements within a week. The contingent was to travel east down the Sarayu on royal boats to the city of Magad, where the river merged into the mighty Ganga. From there, they would turn west to sail up the Ganga to Kashi, the city where the supreme light shines. Parvateshwar had been inundated with inane requests from some of the Ayodhya nobility who were taking the opportunity to travel with the Nilkant. He did plan to honor some strange appeal, like one from a superstitious nobleman who wanted his boat to leave exactly 32 minutes after the beginning of third prahar. Others he had flatly refused, such as a request from another nobleman for his boat to be staffed only by women. The general was quite sure that Anandamayi must also have some special arrangements she wanted made, like carrying a ship hold of milk for her beauty baths. The captain was back shortly. "You may go in, General." Parvateshwar marched in smartly, bowed his head, saluted as he must to royalty, and spoke out loud. "What is it you want, Princess?" "You needn't be so coy, General. You can look up." Parvateshwar looked up. Anandamayi was lying on her stomach next to a picture window overlooking the royal gardens. Kanini, her masseuse, was working her magic on the princess's exotic and supple body. Anandamayi only had one piece of cloth draped loosely over her lower back to her upper thighs, the rest of her a feast for his eyes. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" asked Anandamayi. Parvateshwar blushed a deep red, his head bowed, eyes turned away. To Anandamayi, he appeared to be like the rare cobra male that bows his head to its mate at the beginning of their mating dance, as though accepting the superiority of its partner. "I am sorry, Princess, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to insult you." "Why should you apologize for looking at the royal gardens, General? It is allowed." Parvateshwar, a lifelong celibate, was mollified. It did not appear as though Anandamayi had misunderstood his intentions. He whispered in a soft voice, eyes on the floor, "What can I do for you, Princess?" "It's quite simple, really. A little farther south down the Sarayu is the spot where Lord Ram had stopped with his Guru Vishwamitra and brother Lakshman on his way to slay the demon Taraka. It is the spot where Maharishi Vishwamitra taught Lord Ram the arts of Bal and Atibal, the fabled route to eternal good health and freedom from hunger and thirst. I would like to halt there and offer a puja to the Lord." Parvateshwar, pleased at her devotion to Lord Ram, smiled. "Of course we can stop there, Princess. I will make the arrangements. Would you need any special provisions?" "None whatsoever. An honest heart is all that is needed for a prayer to reach the Lord." Parvateshwar looked up for a brief moment, impressed. Anandamayi's eyes, however, seemed to be mocking. He growled softly, "Anything else, Princess?" Anandamayi grimaced. She was not getting the reaction she had desired. "Nothing else, General." Parvateshwar saluted smartly and left the room. Anandamayi kept staring at Parvateshwar's retreating form. She sighed loudly and shook her head. "Gather around, please," said the Pandit. "We will commence the puja." Shiva's contingent was at Bal Atibal Kund, where Guru Vishwamitra had taught Lord Ram his legendary skills. The Nilkant was unhappy that many of Ayodhya's nobility had unvigiled their way into the voyage to Kashi. What should have been a super-fast 5-ship convoy had turned into a lethargic 50-ship caravan. The straightforward Parvateshwar had found it difficult to deny the convoluted logic of the Chandravanshi nobility. Therefore, Shiva was delighted that Bhagirath had found an ingenious method to cut down the numbers. Craftily, he had suggested to one noble that he should rush to Kashi and set up a welcoming committee for the Nilkant, and thus gain favor with the powerful lord. Seeing one noble hustle away, many others had followed, in a mad dash to be the first to herald the arrival of Nilkant at Kashi. Within hours, the convoy had been reduced to the size that Shiva desired. The puja platform had been set up some 50 meters from the river bank. It was believed that anyone who conducted this prayer with full devotion would never be inflicted with disease. Shiva, Sati, Parvateshwar, Ayurvati, Bhagirath, and Anandamayi sat in the innermost circle next to the Pandit. Others, like Nandi, Veerbhadra, Drapaku, Kritika, and the men of the joint Suryavanshi Chandravanshi brigade, sat a little farther back. The earnest Brahmin was reciting Sanskrit shlokas in the exact same intonations that had been taught him by his guru. Sati was uneasy. She had an uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching her. For some strange reason, she felt intense hatred directed at her. Along with that, she also felt boundless love and profound sadness. Confused, she opened her eyes. She turned her head to her left. Every single person had his eyes closed, in accordance with the guidelines of this particular puja. She then turned to the right and startled as she saw Shiva gazing directly at her. His eyes open wide, reflecting an outpouring of love. Shiva's face sported a slight smile. Sati frowned at her husband, gesturing with her eyes that he should concentrate on his prayers. Shiva, however, pursed his lips together and blew her a kiss. A startled Sati frowned even more. Her Suryavanshi sensibilities felt offended at such frivolous behavior, which she considered a violation of the code. Shiva pouted like a spoiled child, closed his eyes, and turned towards the fire. Sati turned too, eyes closed, allowing herself a slight smile at the fact that she had been blessed with an adoring husband. But she still felt she was being watched, stared at intently. The last ship of the Nilkant's convoy turned round the bend in the Sarayu. With his enemies out of the sight, the Naga emerged from the trees. He walked briskly to the place where the Brahmin had just conducted the puja. He was followed by the queen of the Nagas and 100 armed men. They stopped at a polite distance from the Naga, leaving him alone. Karkotak, Prime Minister to the Queen of the Nagas, looked up at the sky, judging the time. Then he looked disconcertedly at the Naga in the distance. He wondered why the Lord of the People, as the Naga was referred to in his lands, was so interested in this particular puja. The Lord had far greater powers and knowledge. Some even considered him better than the Naga Queen. "Your Highness," said Karkotak, to the queen, "Do you think it advisable to emphasize to the lord of the people the importance of returning home?" "When I want your advice, Karkotak," said the queen in a curt whisper, "I will ask for it." Karkotak immediately retreated, terrified as always of his queen's temper. The queen turned back towards the Naga, her mind considering Karkotak's words. She had to admit that her prime minister was right. The Nagas had to return to their capital quickly. There was little time to waste. The Rajya Sabha, the Naga Royal Council, was to be held soon. The issue of medical support to the Brangas would come up again. She knew that the severe cost of that support was turning many Nagas against the alliance with the Brangas, especially the peace-loving ones who wanted to live their ostracized lives quietly, calling it a product of their bad karma. And without the alliance, her vengeance was impossible. More importantly, she could not desert the Brangas in their hour of need when they had been unflinchingly loyal to her. On the other hand, she could not abandon her nephew, the lord of the people. He was troubled. The presence of that vile woman had disturbed his usual calm demeanor. He was taking unnecessary risks, like the idiotic attack on Sati and Shiva at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple. If he didn't want to kill her, why the hell did he put his own person in such grave peril? What if he had been killed, or worse, caught alive? He had justified it later as an attempt to draw Sati out of Ayodhya, as capturing her within the city was impossible. For what it was worth, he had succeeded in drawing her out on a voyage to Kashi, but she was accompanied by her husband and a whole brigade. It was impossible to kidnap her. The queen saw her nephew move slightly. She stepped forward a little distance, motioning for Kalkotak and the men to remain behind. The Naga had taken out a knife from a newly built hold on his belt. It was the knife Sati had flung at him at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple. He looked at it longingly, letting the blade run up his thumb. Its sharp edge cut his skin lightly. He shook his head angrily, dug the knife hard into the sand, and turned around to walk towards the queen. He stopped abruptly, oddly hesitant. The queen, clearing out of her nephew's earshot, willed her thoughts in a quiet whisper. "Let it go, my child, it's not worth it, let it go." The Naga stood rooted to his spot. Indecision weighed heavy on him. The men in the distance were shocked to see their lord in such a weak state. To the queen's dismay, the Naga turned around and walked back to the spot where he had buried the knife. He picked it up carefully, held it reverentially to his forehead, and put it back into his side hold. The queen snorted in disgust and turned around, signaling Karkotak to come forward. She knew she had no choice. She would have to leave her nephew with bodyguards while she herself would ride out towards Panchavati, her capital.
Ported charges? What rubbish! Bellowed Siamantak, Ayodhya's prime minister. This ship belongs to the Emperor of Swadweep. It carries a very important individual, the most important in the land. Siamantak was in the pilot boat of Andhak, port minister of Magadh, who, unlike typical Chandravanshis, was known to turn a blind eye to everything except the letter of the law. Siamantak turned to look nervously at the massive ship that carried the Nilkant. Shiva was standing on the balustrade with Parvateshwar and Bhagirath. Siamantak was aware that Shiva wanted to stop at Magadh. He had expressed a desire to visit the Narsimha temple on the outskirts of the city. Siamantak did not want to disappoint the Nilkant. However, If he paid portage charges for the ship, it would set a dangerous precedent. How could the emperor's ship pay portage in his own empire? It would open a can of worms with all the river port kingdoms across the empire. The negotiations with Andhak were delicate. I don't care who the ship belongs to, said Andhak, and I don't care if you have Lord Ram himself on that ship. The law is the law. Any ship that ports at Magad has to pay portage. Why should Emperor Dilipa be worried about a small fee of 1,000 gold coins? It's not the money, it's the principle, argued Siamantak. Precisely, it is the principle, so please pay. Shiva was getting impatient. What the hell are they talking about for so long? My lord, said Bhagirath, Andhak is the port minister. He must be insisting the law of portage charges be followed. Siamantak cannot allow any ship owned by my father to pay portage. It is an insult to my father's fragile ego. Andhak is an idiot. Why would you call a person who follows the law stupid? Frowned Parvateshwar. On the contrary, he should be respected. Sometimes, even circumstances should be looked at, General. Prince Bhagirath, I can understand no circumstance under which the letter of the law should be ignored. Shiva did not want to witness yet another argument between the Suryavanshi and Chandravanshi way of life. What kind of a ruler is the king of Magad? King Mahendra? Asked Bhagirath. Doesn't that mean the conqueror of the world? Yes, it does, my lord, but he does not do justice to that name. Magad was a great kingdom once. In fact, there was a time when it was the overlord kingdom of Swati, and its kings were widely respected and honored. But as it happens with many great kings, their unworthy descendants frittered away the wealth and power of their kingdoms. They have been trying hard to live up to Magad's past glory, but have been spectacularly unsuccessful. We share a prickly relationship with them. Really? Why? Well, Ayodhya was the kingdom that defeated them more than 300 years ago to become the overlord of Swati. It was a glorious Ashwamedh Yajna, for this was a time when Ayodhya had still not fallen prey to the wooden kings who rule it today. As you can imagine, Magad was not quite pleased about the loss of status and revenue from tributes. Yes, but 300 years is a long time to carry a grudge. Bhagirath smiled. Kshatriyas have long memories, my lord, and they still suffer from their defeat to Ayodhya. Magad could theoretically benefit from the fact that it is at the confluence of two rivers. It becomes the most convenient trading hub for merchants traveling on river ports on the Sarayu or the Ganga. The advantage was negated after they lost the Ashwamedh to us. A ceiling was imposed on their portage and trading hub charges, and then our enmity received a fresh lease of life 100 years back. And how did that happen? There is a kingdom to the west, up the Ganga, called Prayag. It had historically been in close alliance with Magad. In fact, the ruling families are very closely related. And when the Yamuna changed course from Meluha and started flowing into Swati, it met the Ganga at Prayag, said Bhagirath. That would have made Prayag very important, asked Shiva.
Yes, my lord. Just like Magad, it became a crucial junction for river trade. And unlike Magad, it was not bound by any treaty on its portage and trading charges. Any trader or kingdom
wanting to settle or trade in the newly opened hinterlands of the Yamuna had to pay charges at Prayag. Its prosperity and power grew exponentially. There were even rumors that they were planning to support Magad in an Ashwamedh Yajna to challenge Ayodhya's suzerainty. But when my great grandfather lost the battle to the Suryavanshis and a dam was built on the Yamuna to turn the flow towards Meluha, Prayag's importance fell again. They have blamed Ayodhya ever since. They actually believe we purposely lost the war to give them a devastating blow. I see. Yes, said Bhagirath, shaking his head. But to be honest, we lost the war because my great grandfather employed terrible battle strategy. So you people have hated each other forever? Not forever, my lord. There was a time when Ayodhya and Magad were close allies. So will you be welcome here? Bhagirath burst out laughing. Everyone knows I don't really represent Ayodhya. This is one place I will not be suspect. But King Mahendra is known to be highly suspicious. We should expect spies keeping a close tab on us all the time. He does that to every important visitor. Having said that, their spy network is not particularly efficient. I do not foresee any serious problems. Will my blue neck open doors here? Bhagirath looked embarrassed. King Mahendra does not believe in anything my father believes in, my lord. Since the Emperor of Ayodhya believes in the Nilkant, the Magad king will not. Their conversation was interrupted by Siamantak climbing up the ship ladder. He came up to the Nilkant, saluted smartly, and said, "A deal has been struck, my lord. We can disembark, but we will have to stay here for at least 10 days. Shiva frowned. I have temporarily transferred the ownership of the ship to a palace guest house owner in Magad, my lord. We will stay in his guest house for 10 days. He will pay the portage charges to Andhak from the guest house rent we pay. When we wish to leave, the ownership of the ship will be transferred back to King Dilipa. We have to stay for 10 days so that the guest house owner can earn enough money for his own profit and for portage charges." Shiva gaped at Siamantak. He didn't know whether to laugh at this strangely convoluted compromise or be impressed at Siamantak's bureaucratic brilliance in achieving Shiva's objective of visiting Magad while upholding his emperor's prestige. The portage charges would be paid, but technically not by Emperor Dilipa. The Naga and his soldiers had been silently tracking the fleet carrying Shiva, Sati and their entourage. The Naga queen, Prime Minister Karkotak and her bodyguards had left for Panchavati, the Naga capital. The smaller platoon allowed the Naga to maintain a punishing pace, staying abreast with the fast-moving ships of Shiva's convoy. They had wisely remained away from the banks, far enough to not be visible to the boat lookouts, but close enough to follow their paths. They had moved farther inland to avoid Magad and intended to move closer to the river once they had bypassed the city. "A short distance more, my lord," said Vishwadhumna. "Then we can move back towards the river." The Naga nodded. Suddenly, the still of the forest was shattered by a loud scream. "No!" The Naga immediately went down on his knees, giving Vishwadhumna rapid orders with hand signals. The entire platoon went down quickly and quietly, waiting for the danger to pass. But trouble had just begun. A woman screamed again, "No, please leave him!" Vishwadhumna silently gestured to his soldiers to stay down. As far as he was concerned, there was only one course of action to take: retrace their steps, take a wide arc around this area, and move back towards the river. He turned towards his lord, about to offer this suggestion. The Naga, however, was transfixed, eyes glued to a heart-breaking sight. At a distance, partially hidden by the trees and underbush, lay a tribal woman, frantically clutching a boy, no older than 6 or 7 years. Two armed men, possibly Magadhan soldiers, but trying to pull the child away. The woman, showing astounding strength for her frail frame, was holding on to the child desperately. "Damn it!" screamed the leaders of the Magadhans. "Push that woman off, you louts!" In the wild and unsettled lands between the Ganga and Narmada lived scattered tribes of forest people. In the eyes of the civilized city folk living along the great rivers, these tribals were backward creatures because they insisted on living in harmony with nature. While most kingdoms ignored these forest tribes, others confiscated their land at will as populations grew and need for farmlands increased, and a few particularly cruel ones preyed on these helpless groups for slave labor. The Magadhan leader kicked the woman hard. "You can get another son, but I need this boy. He will drive my bulls to victory. My father will finally stop his endless preening about winning every race for the last 3 years." The Naga looked at the Magadhan with barely concealed hate. Bull racing was a craze in the Chandravanshi areas, subject to massive bets, royal interest, and intrigue. Riders were needed to scream and agitate the animals to keep them running on the course. At the same time, if the rider were too heavy, they would slow down the animal. Therefore, boys between the ages of 6 and 8 were considered perfect. They would shriek out of fear, and their weight was inconsequential. The children would be tied to the beasts. If the bull went down, the boy rider would be seriously injured or killed. Therefore, tribal children were often kidnapped to slave away as riders. Nobody important missed them if they died. The Magadhan leader nodded to one of the men who drew his sword. He then looked at the women. "I am trying to be reasonable. Let your son go, or I will have to hurt you." "No!" The Magadhan soldier slashed his sword, cutting across the woman's right arm. Blood spurted across the child's face, making him bawl inconsolably. The Naga was staring at the woman, his mouth open in awe. Her bloodied right hand hanging limply by her side, the woman still clung to her son, wrapping her left arm tightly around him. Vishwadumna shook his head. He could tell it was a matter of time before the woman would be killed. He turned towards his soldiers, giving hand signals to crawl back. He turned back towards his lord, but the Naga was not there. He had moved swiftly forward towards the mother. Vishwadumna panicked and ran after his lord, keeping his head low. "Kill her!" ordered the Magadhan leader. The Magadhan soldier raised his sword ready to strike. Suddenly, the Naga broke out from the cover of the trees, his hand holding a knife high. Before the soldier knew what had happened, the knife struck his hand and his sword dropped harmlessly to the ground. As the Magadhan soldier shrieked in agony, the Naga drew out 2 more knives, but he had failed to notice the platoon of Magadhan soldiers at the back. One had his bow at the ready with an arrow strung. The soldier released it at the Naga. The arrow rammed into his left shoulder, slipping between his shoulder cap and torso armor, bursting through to the bone. The force of the blow caused the Naga to fall to the ground, the pain immobilizing him. Seeing their lord down, the Naga's platoon ran in with a resounding yell. My lord! Cried Vishwadhumna as he tried to support the Naga back to his feet. Who the hell are you? Screamed the cruel Magadhan leader, retreating towards the safety of his platoon before turning back to the Naga's men. Get out of here if you want to stay alive, shouted one of the Naga soldiers, livid at the injury to his lord. Bangas! Yelled the Magadhan, recognizing the accent. What in the name of Lord Indra are you scum doing here? It's Branga, not Banga. Do I look like I care? Get out of my land. The Branga did not respond as he saw his Naga lord getting up slowly, helped by Vishwadhumna. The Naga signaled Vishwadhumna to step back and tried to pull the arrow out of his shoulder, but it was buried too deep. He broke its shaft and threw it away. The Magadhan pointed at the Naga menacingly. I am Agrasen, the Prince of Magad. This is my land. These people are my property. Get out of the way. The Naga did not respond to the royal brat. He turned around to see one of the most magnificent sights he had ever seen. The mother lay almost unconscious behind his soldiers, her eyes closing due to the tremendous loss of blood. Her body shivering desperately, too terrified to even whimper, and yet she stubbornly refused to give up her son, her left hand still wrapped tight around him, her body protectively positioned in front of her child. What a mother! The Naga turned around, his eyes blazing with rage, his body tense, his fists clenched tight. He whispered in a voice that was eerily calm, You want to hurt a woman because she is protecting her child. Sheer menace dripped from that soft voice. It even managed to get through to a person lost in royal ego. But Agrasen could not back down in front of his fawning courtiers. Some crazy Branga with an unseasonal holy mask was not going to deprive him of his prize catch. This is my kingdom. I can hurt whoever I want. So if you want to save your sorry hide, get out of here. You don't know the power of. You want to hurt a mother because she is protecting her child. Agrasen fell silent. As terror finally broke through his thick head, he turned to see his followers. They too felt the dread that the Naga's voice emanated. A shocked Vishwadhumna stared at his lord. He had never heard his lord raise his voice so loud. Never. The Naga's breathing was heavy, going intermittently through gritted teeth, his body stiff with fury. And then Vishwadhumna heard the Naga's breathing return slowly to normal. He knew it instantly. His lord had made a decision. The Naga reached to his side and drew his long sword, holding it away from his body, ready for the charge. And then he whispered his orders. No mercy. No mercy! Screamed the loyal Branga soldiers. They charged after their lord. They fell upon the hapless Magadhans. There was no mercy. Chapter 3. The Pandit of Magad. It was early morning when Shiva left the guest house for the Narsimha temple. He was accompanied by Bhagirath, Drapaku, Siamantak, Nandi and Veerbhadra. Magad was a far smaller town than Ayodhya, not having suffered due to commercial or military success and the resultant mass immigration. It remained a pretty town with leafy avenues. While it did not have the awesome organization of Devagiri or the soaring architecture of Ayodhya, it was not bogged down by the boring standardization of the Meluhan capital or the grand chaos of the Swadweepan capital. It did not take Shiva and his entourage more than just half an hour to get across to the far side of the city where the magnificent Narsimha temple stood. Shiva entered the compound of the grand shrine. His men waited outside as per his instructions, but only after scoping the temple for suspects. The temple was surrounded by a massive square garden, a style from Lord Rudra's land, far beyond the western borders of India. The garden had an ingeniously designed gargantuan fountain at its heart and rows of intricate waterways, flower beds, and grass spread out from the center in simple yet stunning symmetry. At the far end stood the Narsimha temple. Built of pure white marble, it had a giant staircase leading up to its main platform, a spire that shot up at least 70 meters and had ornately carved statues of gods and goddesses all across its face. Shiva was sure this awe-inspiring and obviously expensive temple had been built at a time when Magad had the resources of the entire Swadweep Confederacy at its command. He took off his sandals at the staircase, climbed up the steps, and entered the main temple. At the far end was the main sanctum of the temple, with the statue of its god, Lord Narsimha, on a majestic throne. Lord Narasimha had lived many thousands of years ago, before even Lord Rudra's time. Shiva mused that if the Lord's idol was life-size, then he must have been a powerful figure. He looked unnaturally tall, at least 8 feet, with a musculature that would terrify even the demons. His hands were unusually brawny, with long nails, making Shiva think that just the Lord's bare hand must have been a fearsome weapon. But it was the Lord's face that stunned Shiva. His mouth was surrounded by lips that were large beyond imagination. His moustache hair did not flow down like most men, but came out in rigid tracts like a cat's whiskers. His nose was abnormally large, with sharp eyes on either side. His hair sprayed out a fair distance like a mane. It almost looked as though Lord Narsimha was a man with the head of a lion. Had he been alive today, Lord Narsimha would have been considered a naga by the Chandravanshis and hence feared, not revered. Don't they have any consistency? Consistency is the virtue of mules. Shiva looked up, surprised how someone had heard his thoughts. A Vasudev Pandit emerged from behind the pillars. He was the shortest Pandit that Shiva had met so far, just a little over 5 feet. But in all other aspects, his appearance was like every other Vasudev. His hair snowy white, with his face wizened with age. He had clad in a saffron dhoti and angavastram. How did you? That is not important, interrupted the Pandit, raising his hand, not finding it important to explain how he discerned Shiva's thoughts. That conversation, another time, great Nilkant. Shiva could have sworn he heard the Pandit's voice in his head. The words were broken, like the voice was coming from a great distance, very soft and not quite clear, but it was the Pandit's voice. Shiva frowned, for the Pandit's lips had not moved. O Lord Vasudev, this foreigner's impressive. Shiva heard the Pandit's voice again. The Pandit was smiling slightly. He could tell that the Nilkant could hear his thoughts. You are not going to explain, are you? asked Shiva with a smile. No, you are certainly not ready yet. The Pandit's appearance may have been like other Vasudevs, but his character was clearly different. This Vasudev was straightforward to the point of being rude, but Shiva knew the apparent rudeness was not intended. It was just a reflection of the mercurial nature of this particular Pandit's character. Maybe the Pandit was a Chandravanshi in another life. I am a Vasudev, said the Pandit. There is no other identity I carry today. I am not a son or husband or father, and I am not a Chandravanshi. I am only a Vasudev. A man has many identities, Panditji. The Pandit narrowed his eyes. Were you born a Vasudev? Nobody is born a Vasudev, Lord Neelkant. You earn it. There is a competitive examination for which Suryavanshis or Chandravanshis can appear. If you pass, you cease to be anything else. You give up all other identities. You become a Vasudev. But you were a Chandravanshi before you earned your right to be a Vasudev, smiled Shiva as though merely stating a fact. The Pandit smiled, acknowledging Shiva's statement. Shiva had many questions he wanted answered, but there was a most obvious one for this particular Vasudev. A few months back, the Vasudev Pandit at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple had told me that my task is not to destroy evil, but to find out what evil is, said Shiva. The Vasudev Pandit nodded. I am still digesting that idea, so my question is not on that, continued Shiva. My query is about something else, he said. He had told me that the Suryavanshi represent the masculine life force and the Chandravanshis represent the feminine. What does this mean? Because I don't think it has anything to do with men and women. You can't get more obvious than that, my friend. You are right. It has nothing to do with men and women. It has to do with the way of life of the Suryavanshis and Chandravanshis. Way of life? Prince Agrasen has been killed? Asked Bhagirath. Yes, Your Highness, said Siamantak softly. The news is from a source I trust implicitly. Lord Ram, help us. This is all we need. King Mahendra will think Ayodhya arranged the assassination, and you know how vengeful he can get. I hope that he doesn't think that, Your Highness, said Siamantak. It's the last thing we need. Their spies have been following us, said Nandi. I am sure they have a report of our whereabouts and movements since we have entered the city. We cannot be blamed. No, Nandi, said Bhagirath. King Mahendra can also think that we hired assassins to do his son on. By the way, where are the spies? Two of them, said Drapaku, pointing with his eyes in the direction of the spies. They are quite amateurish. The tree doesn't really hide them. Bhagirath smiled slightly. It could be Surapadman, said Siamantak. Everyone in Swadweep is aware that the younger Magadha prince is ruthless. He could have arranged the killing to claim the throne. No, said Bhagirath, narrowing his eyes. Surapadman is by far the more capable son of King Mahendra. For all his faults, the king of Magadha does respect capability, unlike some other rulers I know. Surapadman practically has the throne. He doesn't need to kill his brother for it. But how come there is no public mourning as yet? Asked Drapaku. They are keeping the news secret, said Siamantak. I don't know why. Maybe to arrange a credible story to give at least some respectability to Agrasen's memory, said Bhagirath. That idiot was quite capable of stumbling upon his own sword. Siamantak nodded before turning towards Drapaku. Why does the Lord want to spend so much time in the temple alone? It's quite unorthodox. That's because the Lord himself is quite unorthodox. But why are we keeping his identity secret in Magad? Not everyone who believes in the legend is a follower of the Nilkant Drapaku, said Bhagirath. The present king of Magad does not follow the Nilkant, and the people here are loyal followers of the king. The Lord's identity is best kept undisclosed here. You know what makes humans special when compared to animals? Asked the Pandit. What? Asked Shiva. The fact that we work together, we collaborate to achieve combined goals, we pass on knowledge to each other. So every generation begins its journey from the shoulders of the previous generation and not from scratch. I agree, but we are not the only ones who work in a pack. Other animals, like the elephants or lions, do it as well, but nobody does it on the scale that we do. Yes, that's true, but it's not always about collaboration. It's sometimes about competition as well. It's not always about peace. Many times, it's also about war. Shiva smiled and nodded. So the key point is that we humans are nothing individually, said the Pandit. Our power flows from all of us, from the way all of us live together. Yes, agreed Shiva. And if we have to live together, we must have a way of life, right? Yes, some method for all of us to collaborate or compete with each other. Most people believe there are many hundred ways of life in the world, said the Pandit. Every civilization think that it is unique in some way. Shiva nodded in agreement. But if you actually distill the way people live, there are only two ways, the masculine and the feminine. And what do these ways of life mean? The masculine way of life is life by laws. Laws that could be made by a great leader, perhaps a Vishnu like Lord Ram, or laws that come down from a religious tradition, or collective laws decreed by the people themselves. But the masculine way is clear. Laws are unchangeable and they must be followed rigidly. There is no room for ambiguity. Life is predictable because the populace will always do what has been ordained. Meluha is a perfect example of such a way of life. It is obvious, therefore, why the people of this way of life live by the code, truth, duty, and honor, since that's what they need to be successful in this system. And the feminine? The feminine way of life is life by probabilities. There are no absolutes, no black or white. People don't act as per some preordained law, but based on probabilities of different outcomes perceived at that point of time. For example, they will follow a king who they think has a higher probability of remaining in power. The moment the probabilities change, their loyalties do as well. If there are laws in such a society, they are malleable. The same laws can be interpreted differently at different points of time. Change is the only constant. Feminine civilizations like Swadeep are comfortable with contradictions, and the code for success in such a system? Unmistakably, passion, beauty, and freedom. And no one way of life is better. Obviously, both types of civilizations must exist because they balance each other. How? You see, A masculine civilization at its peak is honorable, consistent, reliable, and spectacularly successful in an age suitable for its particular set of laws. There is order, and society moves coherently in a preordained direction. Look at the Suryavanshis today. But when masculine civilizations decline, they cause horrible turmoil, becoming fanatical and rigid. They will attack those that are different, try to convert them to their truth, which will lead to violence and chaos. This especially happens when an age changes. Change is difficult for the masculine. They will cling even more rigidly to their laws, even though those laws may be unsuitable for the new age. Masculine civilization enforce order, which is welcome when they are strong, but is suffocating when they decline. The Asuras, who were followers of the masculine way, had faced similar problems when their power started waning. So, when fanaticism causes rebellions born of frustration, the openness of the feminine brings a breath of fresh air. Exactly. The feminine way incorporates all differences. People of varying faiths and belief can coexist in peace. Nobody tries to enforce their own version of the truth. There is a celebration of diversity and freedom, which brings forth renewed creativity and vigor, causing tremendous benefits to society. The Devas, who were followers of the feminine way, brought in all this when they defeated the Asuras. But as it happens, with too much freedom, the feminine civilizations overreach into decadence, corruption, and debauchery. Then the people once again welcome the order of the masculine. Yes, the feminine Deva was in decline during Lord Ram's time. The country was corrupt, immoral, and depraved. People clamored for order and civility. Lord Ram ushered that in as he created the new masculine way of life, very intelligently to prevent unnecessary rebellions. He never decried the Deva way. He just called his rule a new way of life, the Suryavanshi path. But can you really say the masculine and the feminine only exist at the level of civilization? Asked Shiva. Doesn't it really exist within every man and woman? Doesn't everyone have a little bit of the Suryavanshi and the bit of the Chandravanshi within themselves? The relative influence with the individual changing depending the situations he faces? Yes, you are right, but most people have a dominant trait, either the masculine or the feminine. Shiva nodded. The reason why you need to know the two ways of life is because once you have discovered evil, you will have to tailor your message depending on which people you speak to. You will have to convince the Suryavanshis in one manner and the Chandravanshis in an altogether different manner in the battle against evil. Why would I need to convince them? I don't think either the Suryavanshis or Chandravanshis lack in courage. It has nothing to do with courage, my friend. Courage is only needed once the war begins. To begin with, you need to persuade the people to embark upon the war against evil. You will need to influence them to give up their attachments to evil. Attachment to evil, cried a flabbergasted Shiva. Why in the name of the holy lake would anyone be attached to evil? The Pandit smiled. Shiva sighed. Now what? What's the explanation for stopping the conversation at this moment? I'm not ready. The time is not right. The Pandit laughed. I can't explain it to you right now, Neelkant. You would not understand. And when you discover evil, you will not need my explanation in order to understand. Jai Guru Vishwamitra, Jai Guru Vashisht. Chapter 4. The City Where the Supreme Light Shines. Prince Surapadman, asked a surprised Bhagirath. Here? Yes, your highness, said Siamantak, worried. Bhagirath turned towards Shiva. The Nilkant nodded. The Prince of Ayodhya turned towards Siamantak. Let Prince Surapadman in. A dashing figure marched in, tall, well-built and swarthy. Surapadman sported a handlebar moustache, smoothly oiled and curled up at the edges. His well-maintained hair was long and neatly arranged under an extravagant yet tasteful crown. He wore an ochre dhoti with a white angavastram, sober for a Chandravanshi royal. There were numerous battle scars on his body, a sign of pride on any Kshatriya. He walked straight up to Shiva, went down on his haunches and touched the Nilkant's feet with his head. My lord, it is an honor to finally have your presence in India. A surprised Shiva had the presence of mind not to step back. That could easily have been seen as an insult. He blessed Surapadman with a long life. Ayushman Bhava, Prince. How did you know who I am? Divine light cannot be kept secret, my lord, said Surapadman, turning towards Bhagirath with a knowing smile, no matter how strong a veil one puts on it. Bhagirath smiled and nodded at Surapadman. I heard about your brother, said Shiva. Please accept my condolences. Surapadman didn't say anything to acknowledge the commiseration. He bowed politely and changed the subject. I would like to apologize to you for not receiving you with the ceremonial honor due to the long-awaited Nilkant. But my father can be a little stubborn. That's all right. I have not given anybody any reason to honor me just as yet. Why don't we talk about what you actually came here for, Surapadman? My lord, I suppose nothing remains a secret from you. My brother was killed a few days back while in the forest with some friends and his bodyguards. There is a belief that Ayodhya may have carried out this dastardly act. I can assure you we didn't, started Bhagirath. Surapadman stretched out his hand, requesting for silence. I know that, Prince Bhagirath, said Surapadman. I have a different theory about his murder. Surapadman reached into the pouch tied to his waistband and fished out a Branga gold coin. It was exactly similar to the gold coin that Shiva had recovered from the Naga lord of the people. My lord, said Surapadman, this is something I found near my brother's body. I believe that you had recovered a gold coin from a Naga while you were in Ayodhya. Is this similar to that coin? Bhagirath stared at Surapadman with shock. He was wondering how Surapadman knew about the Nilkant's discovery. Rumors about Surapadman building his own spy network must be true. A network independent of the outrageously incompetent Magad intelligence services. Shiva took the coin from Surapadman, staring at it hard with his body taut with anger. I don't suppose that filthy rat has been caught? Surapadman was surprised at Shiva's intense reaction. No, my lord. Regrettably not. I fear he may have escaped into the rat hole he emerged from. Shiva handed the coin to Surapadman. He was quiet. Surapadman turned towards Bhagirath. This is all the confirmation I needed, Prince. I will report to the king that my brother, Prince Agrasen, died while valiantly defending Magad from a Naga terrorist attack. I will also report that Ayodhya had nothing to do with this. I am sure even you don't want a pointless war between the two pillars of the Chandravanshi confederacy, especially not now when we suffered such a grievous loss to the Suryavanshis. The last comment was a jibe, Ayodhya had lost face amongst Chandravanshis due to its leadership in the disastrous war against the Meluhans at Dharmakhet. Your words assuage a deep concern of mine, Prince Surapadman, said Bhagirath. I assure you of Ayodhya's friendly intentions towards Magad, and please allow me to officially convey Ayodhya's condolences on your brother's untimely death. Surapadman nodded politely. He turned towards Shiva again with a low bow. My lord, I can see that you two have a bone to pick with the Nagas. I request you to call me to your service when the war with this particular demon is to be fought. Shiva looked at Surapadman with a surprised frown. The prince had not given an impression till now that he loved his brother or even sought vengeance. My lord, whatever he may have been like, said Surapadman, he was my brother. I must avenge his blood. The Naga killed my brother as well, Prince Surapadman, said Shiva, referring to Brahaspati, the chief scientist of Meluha, who was like a brother to him. I will call you to battle when the time is right. Shiva's entourage left Magad quietly, unlike any other city that Shiva had been to, both in Meluha and Swadweep. There was no jamboree organized to see him off. His coming and going had been secret from most people in Magad. Surapadman, however, had come to the Magad port incognito to pay his respects to the Nilkant before his departure. The ships sailed into the standard Meluhan convoy formation, with the main ship carrying the Nilkant and his companions, surrounded on all four sides by a ship each. Regardless of which side an enemy cutter came from, they would have to fight through an entire battleship before reaching the Nilkant's craft. A crucial role in this formation was played by the lead ship. It was the speed controller for the entire convoy. It had to sail slow enough to protect the Nilkant's ship from the first, but be fast enough to afford enough space for Shiva's ship to slip through and escape if need be. A Chandravanshi captain was in command of the lead ship, and he was doing a spectacular inept job. He was speeding at a maniacal pace, perhaps to show the prowess of his vessel. This kept opening up a breach between his lead boat and Shiva's vessel. Parvateshwar had to keep blowing the ship horn to alert the lead boat captain and slow him down. Tired of this inefficiency, Parvateshwar had decided to travel in the lead ship to teach a thing or two to the Chandravanshi captain about the basics of naval defense formations. Considering the task at hand, Parvateshwar was distressed that Anandamai had, for some inexplicable reason, decided to also travel on the lead ship. So why are we so slow? Asked Anandamai. Parvateshwar turned from the balustrade at the fore of the ship. He had not seen her tiptoe to his side. She was standing with her back to the railing, her elbows resting on it lightly, with one of her heels placed on the block at the bottom of the railing. Her posture had the effect of raising her already short dhoti a fair distance up her right leg and stretching her bosom out provocatively. Parvateshwar, uncomfortable for some reason he could not fathom, stepped back a bit. This is a naval defense formation, princess, labored Parvateshwar, as if explaining complicated mathematics to a child unprepared to understand. It would take me a lifetime to explain it to you. Are you asking me to spend a lifetime with you, you old devil? Parvateshwar turned red. Well, continued Anandamai, it will certainly not take me a lifetime to tell you something quite basic. Instead of trying to keep our lead boat agonizingly slow, simply tie a rope of approximately the right length from here to the main ship.
Then have a soldier posted at the back who signals every time the rope touches the water, which would mean that the lead vessel is too slow and should speed up. And if the rope becomes taut, the soldier can relay a signal that the lead ship should slow down. Anandamayi slipped her hands into her hair to straighten them out. You will make much better time, and I will be able to get off this ridiculously small quarters into a more comfortable Kashi palace. Parvateshwar was struck by the ingenuity of her suggestion. That is brilliant. I will immediately have the captain execute these orders. Anandamayi reached out a delicate hand, catching hold of Parvateshwar and pulling him back. What's the hurry, Parva? A few minutes will make no difference. Talk to me for a while. Parvateshwar turned beet red at both the corruption of his name and Anandamayi's unyielding grip on his arm. He looked down at her hands. Anandamayi frowned and pulled her hands back. They are not dirty, General. That's not what I was implying, Princess. Then what? Asked Anandamayi, her tone slightly harsher. I cannot touch a woman, Princess, especially not you. I am sworn to lifelong celibacy. Anandamayi was aghast, staring as though Parvateshwar was an alien. Hold on. Are you saying you are an 180-year-old virgin? Parvateshwar, chagrined at the completely inappropriate conversation, turned around and stormed off. Anandamayi collapsed into a fit of giggles. Vishwadhumna heard the soft footfalls. He immediately drew his sword, giving hand signals to his platoon to do likewise. Their platoon had moved deeper into the forest south of Magad after the skirmish with Prince Agrasen and his platoon. The Naga had been injured seriously and was not in a position to travel far. They had travelled as fast as they could without risking the Naga's life, as the angry Magadhans scoured the land for the killers of their prince. Vishwadhumna hoped the sounds he was hearing did not come from the Magadhans. His lord was in no state to fight or flee. Put your swords down, you imbecile, whispered a strong feminine voice. If I would really wanted to kill you, I would have done it even before you drew your weapon. Vishwadhumna did not recognize the hoarse whisper. Perhaps the tiredness of long travel or the cold of winter had roughened the voice, but he certainly recognized the tone. He immediately put his sword down and bowed his head. The queen of the Nagas emerged from the trees, leading her horse quietly. Behind her was her trusted prime minister, Karkotak, and 50 of her elite bodyguards. I asked you to do just one simple thing, hissed the queen. Can't you ensure the protection of your lord? Is that so difficult? My lady, whispered a nervous Vishwadhumna. The situation suddenly got out of... Shut up, glared the queen, throwing the reins of her horse to one soldier as she walked quickly towards the cloth tent at the center of the clearing. She entered the cramped tent and took off her mask. On a bed of hay lay her nephew, the lord of the people. He was covered in bandages, his body limp and weak. The queen looked at her nephew with concerned eyes, her tone kind. Are we now in alliance with the tribals also? The Naga opened his eyes and smiled. He whispered weakly, No, Your Highness. Then in the name of the Paramatma, why are you risking your own life to save one of the forest people? Why are you causing me so much grief? Don't I have enough on my plate already? Forgive me, Mosi.
But haven't I already taken care of your biggest source of tension?
Yes, you have, and that is the only reason why I have come all this way for you. You have earned the devotion of all the Nagas, but your karma is still not complete. There are many things you need to do, and stopping some royal brat from what you believe is wrong does not figure high on that list. This country is full of repulsive royals who abuse their people. Are we going to fight every single one? It is not that simple, Mossy. Yes, it is. The Magadha prince was doing something wrong, but it is not your duty to stop every person who does something wrong. You are not Lord Rudra. It was trying to kidnap a boy for a bull race. The queen sighed. It happens all over. It happens to thousands of children. This bullfighting is an addictive disease. How many will you stop? But he didn't just stop there, whispered the Naga. He was about to kill the boy's mother because she was trying to protect her child. The queen stiffened. Quick anger rose within her. There aren't too many mothers like this, whispered the Naga with a rare emotion. They deserve protection. Enough! How many times have I told you to forget this? The queen rapidly put her mask back on her face and stormed out. Her men kept their heads bowed, terrified of her fearsome rage. Karkotak? Yes, my lady. We leave within the hour. We are going home. Make preparations. The lord of the people was in no position to travel. Karkotak knew that. But your highness, his words were cut short by a petrifying glare from the queen. It was just a little over 3 weeks when Shiva's convoy was closing in on Kashi, the city where the supreme light shines. The city had been settled along a voluptuous bend of the holy Ganga river as it took a leisurely northwards meander before flowing east again. If looked at from the sky, this meander gave the impression of a crescent moon, incidentally the royal insignia of the Chandravanshis. Therefore, in the eyes of the Swadweepans, Kashi was the most natural Chandravanshi city. Kashi also had its own superstition. The city had been built only along the western banks of the river meander, leaving its eastern banks bare. It was believed that whoever built a house on the eastern side at Kashi would suffer a terrible fate. The royal family of Kashi had therefore bought all the land to the east, ensuring that nobody, even by mistake, would suffer the wrath of the god. As Shiva's ship was moving towards the legendary Assi Ghat, or port of 80, one of the main docking points of this thriving city, the crowd on the steps started beating their drums for the ceremonial welcome aarti. It's a beautiful city, whispered Sati, running her hand over her protruding belly. Shiva looked at her and smiled, taking her hand, kissing it gently and holding it to the chest. For some reason, it feels like home. This is where our child should be born. Sati smiled. Yes, this shall be the place. Even from afar, Bhagirath could make out the countenance of many Ayodhya nobles jostling with the Kashi aristocracy, striving to raise their welcome lamp while berating their aides to hold their family pennants higher. They wanted the Mahadev to notice and favor them. But the Nilkant noticed something more unusual. Bhagirath, said Shiva, turning to his left, the city has no fortification. Why in the name of the Holy Lake do they have no protection? Oh, that's a long story, my lord, said Bhagirath. I have all the time in the world. Tell me the entire tale, for this is one of the strangest sights I have seen in India. Well, my lord, the story starts at Assi Ghat, where we are about to dock. This dog did not get its peculiar name because it has 80 steps. Neither did it get its name from the small Assi rivulet that flow close by. It got its name due to an execution that took place here. In fact, 80 executions in just one day. Lord Ram be merciful, said a flabbergasted Sati. Who were those unfortunate people? They were not unfortunate, my lady, said Bhagirath. They were the worst criminals in history. 80 members of the Asura royalty were put to death by Lord Rudra for war crimes. Many believe that it was not the exhausting battles between the Devas and Asuras that put an end to the evil Asura menace, but this sublime act of justice that Lord Rudra performed. Without their key leaders, the Asura insurrection against the Devas fizzled out. And then? Asked Shiva, remembering what the Vasudev Pandit at Ayodhya had told him. Who said the Asuras were evil? And then something strange happened. Soon after Lord Rudra, the greatest and most fearsome warrior in history, abandoned all violence. He banned the use of Daivi Astras that had caused enormous casualties in the Deva-Asura war. Anyone who disobeyed this order would feel the wrath of Lord Rudra, who said he would even break his vow of non-violence and destroy 7 generations of the man who used any divine weapons. I know of Lord Rudra's order on the Daivi Astras, said Sati, as the Meluhans were also aware of the Mahadev's ban on divine weapons. But I didn't know the story behind it. What made him give this order? I don't know, my lady, said Bhagirath. I know, mused Shiva. This must have been the moment when Lord Rudra realized the Asuras were not evil, just different. He must have been racked by guilt. But the story did not end there. Lord Rudra also said Assi Ghat and Kashi had become holy. He didn't explain why, but the people of that time assumed that it must be because this was the place that ended the war. Lord Rudra said there would be no further killing at Assi Ghat, ever. That the place should be respected, that the spirits at Assi Ghat and Kashi would forgive the sins of even the most sinful and guide them to salvation if their dead body was cremated there. Interesting, said Sati. The Kashi kings, who were great followers of Lord Rudra, not only banned any executions or killing at Assi Ghat, they also threw it open for cremations for people from any kingdom without prejudice or caste, creed or sex. Any person can find salvation here. Over time, the belief in Kashi being the gateway to a soul's deliverance gained ground, and vast numbers of people started coming here to spend their final days. It was impossible for the small Assi Ghat to cater to such large number of the dead. So cremations were stopped at Assi, and the city converted another massive ghat called Manikarnika into a giant crematorium. But what does that have to do with there being no fort walls? Asked Shiva. The point is that if the most influential people in Swadeep came here at the time of their death with the belief that this would be a place where their sins would be forgiven and they could attain salvation, very few would want Kashi to be destroyed or even be involved in the regular wars that raged in the Confederacy. In addition, Kashi king took Lord Rudra's order of non-violence to what they believe was its logical conclusion. The royal family publicly swore that neither they nor their descendants would even indulge in warfare. In fact, they forswore any killing except in the case of self-defense. To prove their commitment to their word, they actually tore down their fort ramparts and built an open ring road around the city. They then erected great temples all along the road, giving it an aura of spirituality. Kashi wasn't attacked or conquered. On the contrary, my lord,
continued Bhagirath. Their intense commitment to Lord Rudra's teachings almost made Kashi sacred. Nobody could attack this city, for it would be seen as an insult to Lord Rudra. It became a land of supreme peace and hence prosperity. Suppressed people from across the Confederacy found solace here. Traders found that this was the safest place to base their business. Peace and non-alignment to any other kingdom in Swadweep had actually made Kashi an oasis of stability. Is that why you find so many Brangas here? Yes, my lord. Where else would they be safe? Everybody is out of harm's way in Kashi, but the Branga have tested even the famed Kashi patience and hospitality. Really? Apparently, they were very difficult to get along with. Kashi is a cosmopolitan city and nobody is forced to change their way of life. But the Brangas wanted their own area because they have certain special customs. The Kashi royal family advises its citizens that the Brangas have suffered a lot in their homeland and that Kashi denizens should be compassionate. But most people find that difficult. In fact, a few years back it was rumored that the situation came to such a pass that the king of Kashi was about to order the eviction of the Brangas. And then what happened? Asked Shiva. Gold managed to do what good intentions couldn't. Branga is by far the richest land today. The king of Branga had apparently sent gold equivalent to 10 years of Kashi's tax collection, and the eviction order was buried. Why would the Branga king spend his own money to help people who have abandoned his country? I don't know, my lord. I think we can put that down as another strange characteristics of the Brangas. The ship docked softly at Assi Ghat and Shiva looked towards the multitudes gathered there to welcome him. Parvateshwar had already organized the place so that Shiva could alight. He saw Drapaku at a distance giving orders to Nandi and Veerbhadra. Bhagirath had already bounded down the gangway in search of the Kashi head of police. Sati tapped Shiva lightly. He turned to look at her and she gestured delicately with her eyes. Shiva looked in the direction she had indicated. In the distance, away from the mill, letting his nobles and the Ayodhya aristocracy hog the frontiers of the Nilkant's welcome, under an understated royal umbrella stood a sombre old man. Shiva joined his hands in a polite namaste and bowed slightly to Atithigwa, the king of Kashi. Atithigwa in turn bowed low in respect to the Nilkant. Sati could not be sure from the distance, but it appeared as though the king had tears in his eyes. Chapter 5. A Small Wrong. Mumbled Shiva as Sati softly kissed him awake. He cupped her face gently. Are my eyes deceiving me, or are you getting more beautiful every day? Sati smiled, running her hand along her belly. Stop flattering me so early in the morning. Shiva edged up on his elbows, kissing her again. So there is a fixed schedule for compliments now. Sati laughed again, slowly getting off the bed. Why don't you go wash? I have requested for breakfast to be served in our room. Ah, you're finally learning my ways. Shiva always hated eating at the organized and civilized dining room gatherings that Sati liked. As Shiva walked into the comfortable washroom attached to their chamber at the Kashi palace, Sati looked out. The famous ring road, also called the Sacred Avenue, was clearly visible. It was an awe-inspiring sight. Unlike the congested city of Kashi itself, the avenue was very broad, allowing even 6 carts to pass simultaneously. There was a breathtaking profusion of trees around the road, with probably all the species of flora from the Indian subcontinent represented. Beyond the trees lay the plethora of temples. The boulevard extended up to a roughly semicircular distance of more than 30 kilometers, and not one of the buildings built on its side was anything but a place of worship. The Chandravanshis like to say that almost every Indian god has a home on Kashi's sacred avenue. But of course, that belief was scarcely built on reality, considering that the Indians worshipped over 30 million gods. But one could safely state that particularly all the popular gods had a temple dedicated to them on this holy pathway. And the most majestic temple of them all was dedicated, but of course, to the most admired of them all, the great Mahadev himself, Lord Rudra. It was this temple that Sati was staring at. It had been built close to the Brahma Ghat. Legend had it that the original plan for the temple, hatched by the Devas during the life of Lord Rudra himself, was to have it close to Assi Ghat, the scene of Lord Rudra's deliverance of justice. But the great Mahadev, the scourge of the Asuras, had ordered that no memorial to him must ever be built near Assi Ghat, with one of his most unfathomable lines: "Not here, anywhere else, but not here." No one has understood why, but at the same time, no one argued with the fearsome Lord Rudra. "They call it the Vishwanath temple," said Shiva, startling Sati with his sudden appearance. "It means the Lord of the world." "He was a great man," whispered Sati. "A true god." "Yes," agreed Shiva, bowing to Lord Rudra. "Om Rudraya Namah. Om Rudraya Namah." "It was good of King Atithigva to leave us alone last night. We certainly needed the rest after the string of ceremonies at Assi Ghat." "Yes, he seems to be a good man, but I fear he will not be leaving you alone today. I could make out that he has a lot to talk to you about." Shiva laughed. "But I do like this city. The more I see it, the more it feels like home." "Let's eat our breakfast," said Sati. "I think we have a long day ahead." "Especially not you?" asked Kanini. "He actually said that." "Those very words," said Anandamayi. "He said he cannot touch any woman, especially not me." Kanini expertly massaged the rejuvenating oil into Anandamayi's scalp. "That does make sense, princess. There are only two women who can make a man break the vow of lifelong celibacy. Either the Apsara Menaka or you." Two, Anandamayi had her eyebrows raised at being considered akin to the celestial nymph. "My apologies," chuckled Kanini. "What is Menaka compared to you?" Anandamayi laughed. "But this is a far tougher challenge than Menaka's, princess," continued Kanini. "Sage Vishwamitra had taken the vow late in his life. He had already experienced the pleasure of love. Menaka just had to remind him, not create the need. The general, on the other hand, is a virgin." "I know, but when something is so beautiful, achieving it cannot be easy, can it?" Kanini narrowed her eyes. "Don't lose your heart before you have won his, princess." Anandamayi frowned. "Of course I haven't." Kanini stared hard at Anandamayi and smiled. The princess was obviously in love. She hoped Parvateshwar had the good sense to realize his good fortune in time. "You have a beautiful capital, Your Highness," said Shiva. The sun had already covered a third of its daily journey. Shiva was sitting in King Atithigva's private chambers with Sati. Drapaku, Nandi, and Veerbhadra stood guard at the door, supporting the baton-wielding Kashi royal guard. It was a mystery to Drapaku how only batons could be used to protect a royal family. What if there was a serious attack? Meanwhile, Parvateshwar has set off on a tour with the Kashi police chief. He wanted to ensure that the path from the palace to the Kashi Vishwanath temple was well protected from the Nilkant's planned visit in the afternoon. It was expected that practically the entire city would be lining the sacred avenue to catch a glimpse of the Nilkant, for only the nobility had been allowed to meet him at his arrival at Asighat. Actually, this is your city, my lord, said Atithigva with a low bow. Shiva frowned. Lord Rudra had spent most of his time in Kashi, calling it his adopted home, explained Atithigva. After his departure to his birthland to the west, the Kashi royal family conducted a puja at Asighat, effectively making Lord Rudra and his successors our true kings for eternity. My family, while being different from the royal family that conducted that puja, honors the promise to this day. We only function as the caretakers of the birthright of Lord Rudra's successors. Shiva was getting increasingly uncomfortable. Now that Lord Rudra's successor is here, it is time for him to ascend the throne of Kashi, continued Atithigva. It will be my honor to serve you, my lord. Shiva almost choked on a combination of surprise and exasperation. These people are mad. Well-intentioned, but mad. I have no intentions of becoming a king, your highness, smiled Shiva. I certainly don't think of myself as worthy of being called Lord Rudra's successor. You are a good king, and I suggest you to continue to serve your people. But my lord, I have a few requests though, your highness, interrupted Shiva. He did not want to continue the discussion on his royal antecedents. Anything, my lord. Firstly, my wife and I would like our child to be born here. May we impose on you hospitality for this duration? My lord, my entire palace is yours, Sati, and you can stay here for all time to come. Shiva smiled slightly. No, I don't think we will stay that long. Also, I want to meet the leader of the Brangas in your city. His name is Devodas, my lord. I will certainly summon him to your presence. Speaking to anyone else from that unfortunate tribe is useless. Devodas is the only one sensible or capable enough to interact with others. I believe he is out on a trading trip and should be returning by tonight. I will ensure that he is called here at the earliest. Wonderful. The crowd out there looks like it is slipping out of control, Drapaku, pointed Parvateshwar. Parvateshwar was with Bhagirath, Drapaku, and Tratya, the Kashi police chief, upon a raised platform on the sacred avenue. It almost seemed like all of Kashi's 200,000 citizens had descended there to catch a glimpse of the Nilkant. And the Kashi people appeared woefully ill-trained to manage the crowd. They were polite to a fault, which usually worked with the courteous Kashi citizens. But on an occasion like this, when every person was desperate to jump up front and touch the Lord, the firm hand of the Suryavanshi was called for. I'll take care of it, General, said Drapaku as he bounded off the platform to issue instructions to Nandi waiting at the bottom. But he must not raise his hand, said Tratya. He will behave as required by the situation, Tratya, said Parvateshwar, irritated. Nandi, on hearing Drapaku's orders, was off with his platoon. Drapaku, using the hook on his amputated left hand, pulled himself back onto the platform with surprising agility. "It's done, General," said Drapaku. "That crowd will be pushed back." Parvateshwar nodded and turned to look at Shiva and his party. Shiva, holding Sati's hand, walked slowly with a broad smile, acknowledging almost every single person who screamed out his name. Kritika, Sati's companion, paced slightly behind Sati, while Adithigwa, beaming with the commitment of a true devotee, marched silently with his family and ministers in tow. "Chief Tratya!" shouted a panicked Kashi policeman, bounding up the platform. Tratya looked down. "Yes, Kavas?" "A riot is breaking out in the Branga quarter." "Tell me exactly what happened." "They have killed a peacock once again, but this time they were caught red-handed by some of their neighbors, who are swearing retribution for this sin." "I am not surprised. I don't know why His Highness insists on keeping those uncivilized dolts in our city. It was only a matter of time before some citizens lost their patience and did something." "What happened?" asked Parvateshwar. "It's the Brangas. They know that killing peacock is banned in Kashi, as they were Lord Rudra's favorite amongst birds. There is a widespread belief that they sacrifice the bird in some bizarre ceremonies in their colony. Now they have been caught red-handed and are going to be taught a lesson." "Why don't you send some of your men there to break up the riot?" Tratya looked at Parvateshwar strangely. "You won't understand some things. We accept every community from India in Kashi. All of them live peacefully, making this great city their home. But the Brangas purposely want to infuriate every one of us. This riot is actually a bad path to a good end. Just let it happen." Parvateshwar was shocked at the words of the same police chief who had been propagating the virtues of non-violence just a while back. "If they have committed a crime, they should be punished by your courts. Your citizens do not have the right to riot and hurt innocent people who may have had nothing to do with the killing of the bird. It doesn't matter if some of them were innocent. It's a small price to pay if it rids the city of the Brangas and their evil ways. I cannot and will not do anything on this." "If you won't do anything, I will," warned Parvateshwar. Tratya looked at Parvateshwar in exasperation and turned back to look at the Neelkant's entourage. Parvateshwar stared hard at Tratya. It took only a moment for him to make up his mind. "Drapaku, you have my command," said Parvateshwar. "Make sure the crowd breaks as soon as the Lord is in the Vishwanath temple. Prince Bhagirath, will you accompany me? I would need some help as I don't know Chandravanshi customs." "It will be my honor, General," said Bhagirath. "This is not your job," said Tratya, raising his voice for the first time in the day. "You have no right to interfere in our internal affairs." "He has every right," interjected Bhagirath, with the arrogance that only a royal can possess. "Have you forgotten Lord Ram's words? Standing by and doing nothing while a sin is committed is as bad as committing the sin yourself. You should be thanking the general for doing your job." Parvateshwar and Bhagirath quickly stepped down from the platform along with Kavas, ordered Veerbhadra to follow them with 100 men and rushed towards the Branga quarters. "This is tough and tricky," said Bhagirath. They were in front of the Branga quarters. The legendary hoards of gold brought in by the refugees from the east had transformed this particularly congested part of the city into spacious residences. Brangas lived in a lavishly designed and intricately carved multi-story building, the tallest in all of Kashi, save for the Vishwanath temple and the royal palaces. The building was surrounded on all sides by a large garden, strangely enough, both lusciously landscaped and conservatively symmetrical, much like the one at the Narsimha temple in Magad. A board at its entrance proudly proclaimed the loyalty of its residents. May Lord Rudra bless the most divine land of Branga. The city's congestion and confusion began immediately at the border of the fenced garden. Narrow paths led out into what were suburbs dominated by immigrants from Ayodhya, Magad, Prayag, and other parts of the Chandravanshi Confederacy. A little known fact was that even some Meluhans, tired of the regimented life in their homeland and fearful of giving up their birth children at Maika, had found refuge in Kashi. They tolerated the chaos of the Chandravanshi ways for the pleasure of watching their children grow. I am sure it's not just anger at their customs, said Veerbhadra, taking in the stark difference in the lifestyles of the common folk of Kashi and the Brangas. Resentment about their wealth must also drive the hatred towards the Brangas. Bhagirath nodded before turning towards Parvateshwar, who was evaluating the situation. What do you think, General? From a perspective of defense, the location was a disaster. The Brangas were stuck between a rock and a hard place. They were surrounded on all four sides by a hostile population, living in densely populated areas along congested streets leading to the Branga quarters. Escape was out of the question. They would be easily mobbed into the narrow lanes. The garden gave them some measure of protection. Any mob attacking the Brangas would be exposed in that area for at least a minute till they reached the building itself. The Brangas, perhaps always fearful of their status in Kashi, had stocked the roof of their building with huge hoard of rocks. Thrown from the height, the rocks were like missiles, capable of causing serious injury, possibly even death if it hit the right spot. The Kashi mob, meanwhile, was releasing dogs, which the Brangas considered unclean, into the closed compound. They knew the Brangas would respond with stones to chase the animals back. Parvateshwar realized that in this battle of attrition, it was a matter of time before the Branga rocks ran out and they were susceptible to a full frontal attack. Outnumbered at more than 100 to 1, despite the fact that their enemies were armed with such laughable weapons as kitchen knives and washing clubs, the Brangas had little chance of survival. It doesn't look good for the Brangas, said Parvateshwar. Can we reason with the Kashi mob? I already tried, General, said Bhagirath. They will not listen. They believe that the Brangas can buy out the court with their gold. It's probably true, mumbled the Kashi captain, Kavas, quietly revealing his own leanings. Bhagirath turned towards Kavas, who immediately recoiled with fear, for Bhagirath's reputation was legendary in Kashi. You don't agree with the mob, do you? Asked Bhagirath. Kavas's face glowered. I detest the Brangas. They are dirty scoundrels who break every law, even as they throw their gold around. Having said this piece, Kavas seemed to calm down. He looked down and whispered, But is this the way they should be treated? Would Lord Rudra have done this? No, Your Highness. Then find us a solution. Pointing to the angry Kashi citizens surrounding them, Kavas said, This horde will not back off till the Brangas are punished in some form, Prince Bhagirath. How can we ensure that while keeping the Brangas alive and safe? I don't know. What if the Suryavanshis attack them? Asked Parvateshwar, shocked at the effective but borderline ethical solution that had entered his mind. Bhagirath smiled immediately, for he could suspect where Parvateshwar was going. We'll use the batons of the Kashi police, not our weapons. We'll only injure, not kill. Exactly, said Parvateshwar. The mob will get its justice and back off. The Brangas will be injured, but alive. I know this is not entirely right, but sometimes the only way to prevent a grave wrong is to commit a small wrong. I will have to take full responsibility for this and answer to the Paramatma. Bhagirath smiled softly. Some Chandravanshi ways were entering Parvateshwar's psyche. It had not escaped his notice that his elder sister had been lavishing attention on the Meluhan general. Parvateshwar turned to Kavas. I will need 100 batons. Bhagirath shot off with Kavas towards the sacred avenue. They were back in no time. Parvateshwar had meanwhile spoken to the leaders of the Kashi mob, promising them justice if they dropped their weapons. They waited patiently for the Suryavanshis to deliver. Parvateshwar gathered the Suryavanshis in front of him. Meluhans, do not use your swords, use the batons. Limit the blow to their limbs, avoid their head. Keep your shield rigidly in the tortoise formation. Rocks from that height can kill. The Suryavanshis stared at their general. This is the only way the Brangas can be saved, continued Parvateshwar. The Meluhans moved quickly into battle formation with Parvateshwar, Bhagirath and Veerbhadra in the lead. Kavas, who was unfamiliar with such tactics, was placed in the middle where it was safest. As the soldiers marched into the Branga garden, there was a hailstorm of stones. Their shields kept them safe as they strode slowly but surely towards the building entrance. The entrance itself was naturally narrower than the garden path. The tortoise formation would have to be broken here. Parvateshwar ordered a double file charge into the building, shields held left-right to prevent attacks from the sides. He had assumed the rocks could not be used within the building, a grave miscalculation. What a statue, whispered Sati, shuddering slightly at the awe-inspiring sight of Lord Rudra. Shiva and Sati had just entered the massive Vishwanath temple. The temple, built a little distance away from the Brahma Ghat, was an imposing structure. It wasn't just the gargantuan height of 100 meters, but also the overwhelming simplicity of the edifice that inspired wonder. An open garden, built in the symmetrical style of Lord Rudra's native land, provided the entry from the sacred avenue to the temple. The red sandstone structure, almost the color of blood, was startlingly sober. The giant platform, almost 20 meters in height, which soared from the farthest point of the garden, had absolutely no carvings or embellishments, unlike any other temple Shiva had seen so far. 100 steps had been carved into the platform. Devotees who reached atop the platform would be stunned by the main temple's spire, again of red sandstone, which soared an improbable 80 meters. Just like the platform, the main temple also had no carvings. There were 100 square pillars to hold up the spire. Unlike other temples, the sanctum sanctorum was in the center and not at the far end. Within the sanctum was the statue that drew devotees from across the land, the formidable Lord Rudra. Legend had it that Lord Rudra mostly worked alone. He had no friends whose stories could be immortalized in frescoes on the temple wall. There was no favorite devotee whose statue could be placed at his feet. The only partner Lord Rudra had, the only one he listened to, was Lady Mohini. Hence Kritika found it odd that her legendary beauty had not been rendered into an idol. "How come Lady Mohini's statue is not here?" whispered Kritika to an aide of Atithigwa. "You know the stories of the Lord well," replied the aide. "Come." She led Kritika to the other side of the sanctum. To her surprise, Kritika discovered that the sanctum had another entrance from the back. Through that entrance, a devotee would see an idol of Lady Mohini, rumored to be the most gorgeous woman of all time, sitting on a throne. Her beautiful eyes were in an enchanting half stare, but Kritika noticed in her hand, superstitiously hidden at first view, was a knife. Mohini, ever capricious and deadly. Kritika smiled. It seemed fitting that the idols of Lady Mohini and Lord Rudra were back to back. They shared a complex relationship, partners but with vastly different outlooks. Kritika bowed low to Lady Mohini. While some refused to honor her as Vishnu, Kritika was amongst the majority which believed that Lady Mohini deserved the title of the propagator of good. On the other side of the sanctum, Shiva was staring at Lord Rudra's idol. The Lord was an imposing and impossibly muscled man. His hirsute chest sported a pendant. Upon closer examination, Shiva realized the pendant was a tiger claw. The Lord's shield had been laid at the side of his throne, and while the sword too rested along the seat, the Lord's hand was close to the hilt. Clearly, the sculptor wanted to signify that while the most ferocious warrior in history had renounced violence, his weapon lay close at hand, ready to be used on anyone who dared to break his laws. The sculptor had faithfully recreated the proud battle scars that must have adorned Lord Rudra's body. One of the scars ran across his face from his right temple to his left cheek. The Lord also sported a long beard and moustache, many strands of which had been painstakingly curled, with beads rolled into them. "I have never seen anyone in India wear beads in their beard," said Shiva to Atithigwa. "This is the way of the Lord's native people in Pariha, my lord." "Pariha?" "Yes, my lord, the land of fairies. It lies beyond the western borders of India, beyond the Himalaya, our great mountains." Shiva turned back to Lord's idol. The strongest feeling he had in the temple was fear. Was it wrong to feel like this about a god? Wasn't it always supposed to be love, respect, awe? Why fear? Because sometimes nothing clarifies and focuses the mind except fear. Lord Rudra needed to inspire fear to achieve his goals. Shiva heard the voice in his head. It appeared to come from a distance, but it was unquestionably clear. He knew it was a Vasudev Pandit. "Where are you, Panditji?" "Hidden from view, Lord Neelkant. There are too many people around. I need to talk to you." "All in good time, my friend, but if you can hear me, can't you hear the desperate call of your most principled follower?" "Most principled follower?" The voice had gone silent. Shiva turned around, concerned.
Chapter 6. Even a mountain can fall. "Take cover!" shouted Parvateshwar. Bhagirath and he had entered the Branga building to be greeted by a volley of stones. The building had a huge atrium at the entrance, with a skylight. It was a brilliant design that allowed natural light and fresh air to come in unhindered. There was a cleverly constructed retractable ceiling to cover the atrium during the rains. At present, however, the atrium was like a valley of death for the Suryavanshis, surrounded as it was on all sides by balconies from where the Brangas rained stones upon them. A sharp missile hit Parvateshwar on his left shoulder. He felt his collarbone snap. A furious Parvateshwar drew his baton high and bellowed, "Har Har Mahadev! Har Har Mahadev!" yelled the Suryavanshis. They were gods. Mere stones would not stop them. The Suryavanshis charged up the stairs, clubbing all who came in their path, including women. But even in their fury, they were mindful of Parvateshwar's instructions. No strikes on the head. They injured the Brangas but killed none. The Brangas started falling back, faced with a relentless and disciplined Suryavanshi attack. Soon the Suryavanshis were charging up the building to the top. Parvateshwar found it strange that there appeared to be no leader. The Brangas were just a random mob which was fighting heroically, but in a disastrously incompetent manner. By the time the Suryavanshis reached the top, practically all the Brangas were on the floor, writhing in agony, injured but alive. It was then that Parvateshwar heard the noise. Even in the commotion of the numerous Brangas howling in pain, the horrifying din could not be missed. It sounded like hundreds of babies were howling desperately, as if their lives depended on it. Parvateshwar had heard rumors of ghastly ritual sacrifices that the Brangas committed. Fearing the worst, he ran towards the room where the sound emanated from. The general broke open the door with one kick. He was sickened by what he saw. The limp body of the decapitated peacock was held at the corner of the room, its blood being drained into a vessel. Around it were women, each holding a baby writhing in pain. Some babies had blood on their mouths. A horror-struck Parvateshwar dropped his club and reached for his sword. There was a sudden blur to his left. Before he could react, he felt a sharp pain on his head. The world went black. Bhagirath screamed, drawing his sword, as did the Suryavanshis. He was about to run his sword through the man who had clubbed Parvateshwar when a woman screamed, "Please don't!" Bhagirath stopped. The woman was very obviously pregnant. The Branga man was about to raise his club again. The woman screamed once more, "No!" To Bhagirath's surprise, the man obeyed. The other Branga women at the back were carrying on with their sickening ritual. "Stop!" screamed Bhagirath. The pregnant Branga woman fell at Bhagirath's feet. "No, brave prince, don't stop us. I beg you." "High priestess, what are you doing?" asked the Branga man. "Don't humiliate yourself." Bhagirath looked at the scene once again, and this was when the real inference dawned on him. He was stunned. The only children crying were the ones who did not have blood on their mouths. Their limbs were twisted in painful agony, as if a hideous force was squeezing their tiny bodies. The moment some of the peacock blood was poured into a baby's mouth, the child quieted down. Bhagirath whispered in shock, "What the hell?" "Please," pleaded the Branga high priestess, "we need it for our babies. They will die without it. I beg you, let us save them." Bhagirath stood silent.
bewildered. Your Highness, said Veerbhadra, the general. Bhagirath immediately bent down to check on Parvateshwar. His heart was beating, but the pulse was weak. Suryavanshis, we need to carry the general to an Ayur alay. Quickly, we don't have much time. Bearing their leader along, the Suryavanshis rushed out. Parvateshwar had to be taken to a hospital. Ayurvati came out of the operating room. Chandravanshi doctors simply did not have the knowledge to deal with Parvateshwar's injury. Ayurvati had been sent urgent summons. Shiva and Sati immediately rose. Sati's heart sank on seeing the dejected look on Ayurvati's face. How soon will he be all right, Ayurvati? Asked Shiva. Ayurvati took a deep breath. My lord, the club hit the general at a most unfortunate spot, right on his temple. He is suffering severe internal hemorrhaging. The blood loss could be fatal. Shiva bit his lip. I, said Ayurvati. If anyone can save him, it is you, Ayurvati, said Shiva. There is nothing in the medical manuals for such a severe injury, my lord. We could do brain surgery, but that cannot be performed while the patient is unconscious. In the surgery, we apply local pain relievers to allow the conscious patient to guide us with his actions. Taking this risk while Parvateshwar is unconscious could prove more dangerous than the injury itself. Sati's eyes were welling up. We cannot allow this to happen, Ayurvati, said Shiva. We cannot. I know, my lord. Then think of something. You are Ayurvati, the best doctor in the world. I have only one solution in mind, my lord, said Ayurvati. But I don't even know if it would work. The Somras? Asked Shiva. Do you agree? Yes, let's try it. Ayurvati rushed off to her assistants. Shiva turned towards Sati, worried. He knew how close Sati was to her Pitritulya. Her obvious misery would also impact their unborn child. He will be all right, trust me. Where is the damn Somras? Asked an agitated Shiva. I am sorry, my lord, said Atithigwa, but we don't really have large quantities of the Somras. We don't keep any at the Ayur Alay. It's coming, my lord, assured Ayurvati. I have sent Mastrak to my quarters for some. Shiva snorted in frustration and turned towards Parvateshwar's room. Hang on, my friend, we will save you. Hang on. Mastrak came in panting, holding a small wooden bottle. My lady, you have prepared it correctly? Yes, my lady. Ayurvati rushed into Parvateshwar's room. Parvateshwar was lying on a bed in the far corner. Mastrak and Dhruvini, Ayurvati's assistants, sat at the bedside rubbing the juice of neem leaves under his nails. There was a pumping apparatus attached to the general's nose in order to ease his breathing. The hemorrhaging has stopped, my lord, said Ayurvati. He is not getting worse. The vision of the apparatus attached to the general's nose shook Shiva. To see a man such as Parvateshwar in this helpless state was too much for him. Then why is that apparatus required? The bleeding has harmed the part of his brain that controls his breathing, my lord, said Ayurvati in the calm manner she always willed herself into when faced with a medical crisis. Parvateshwar cannot breathe on his own. If we remove this apparatus, he will die. Then why can't you repair his brain? I told you, my lord, a brain surgery cannot be done while the patient is unconscious. It is too risky. I may injure some other vital functions with my instruments. The Somras, it has stopped the bleeding, my lord. He is stable, but it doesn't appear to be healing his brain. What do we do? Ayurvati remained silent. She didn't have an answer. At least an answer what was practical. There must be a way. There is one remote possibility, my lord, said Ayurvati. The bark of the Sanjeevani tree. It is actually one of the ingredients in the Somras, a very diluted ingredient. Then why don't we use that? It is very unstable. The bark disintegrates very rapidly. It has to be taken from a live Sanjeevani tree and used within minutes. Then find a... It doesn't grow here, my lord. It grows naturally in the foothills of the Himalayas. We have plantations in Meluha, but getting it could take months. By the time we return with the bark, it would have disintegrated. There has to be a way. Holy Lake, please find me a way. Your Highness, said Nandi, who had been promoted from the rank of captain. Yes, Major Nandi, said Bhagirath. Can you come with me, please? Where? It's important, Your Highness. Bhagirath thought it was odd that Nandi wanted him to leave the Ayur Alay at the time when Parvateshwar was fighting for his life. But he knew that Nandi was the Nilkant's close friend. More importantly, he also knew that Nandi was a level-headed man. If he was asking him to go somewhere, it would be important. Bhagirath followed. Bhagirath could not hide his surprise as Nandi took him to the Branga building. What is going on, Major? You must meet him, said Nandi. Who? Me, said a tall, dark man stepping out of the structure. His long hair was neatly oiled and tied in a knot. His eyes were doe-shaped, his cheekbones high. He had a clear complexion. His lanky frame was draped in a white starched dhoti with a cream angavastram thrown over his shoulder. His face bore the look of a man who had seen too much sadness for one lifetime. Who are you? I am Divodas, the chief of the Brangas here. Bhagirath gritted his teeth. The general saved all your sorry hides, and you men have brought him to the brink of death. I know, Your Highness. My men thought the general would have stopped us from saving our children. It was a genuine mistake. Our most sincere apologies. You think your apology is going to save his life? It will not, I know that. He has saved my entire tribe from a certain death. He has saved my wife and unborn child. It is a debt that must be paid. The mention of payment made Bhagirath even more livid. You think your filthy gold will get you out of this? Mark my words. If anything happens to the general, I will personally come here and kill every single one of you, every single one. Divodas kept quiet, his face impassive. Your Highness, said Nandi, let us hear him out. Bhagirath grunted in an irritated manner. Gold means nothing, Your Highness, said Divodas. We have tons of it back home. It still cannot buy us out of our suffering. Nothing is more important than life, nothing. You realize the simplicity of that point only when you confront death every day. Bhagirath didn't say anything. General Parvateshwar is a brave and honorable man. For his sake, I will break the vow I took on the name of my ancestors, even if it damns my soul forever. Bhagirath frowned. I am not supposed to share this medicine with anyone who is not a Branga, but I will give it to you for the general. Tell your doctor to apply it on his temples and nostrils. He will live. Bhagirath looked suspiciously at the small silk packet. What is this?
You don't need to know what is it, Your Highness. You just need to know one thing. It will save General Parvateshwar's life. What is this? Ayurvati was looking at the silk pouch Bhagirath had just handed over to him. That doesn't matter, said Bhagirath. Just apply it on his temples and nostrils. It may save his life. Ayurvati frowned. Lady Ayurvati, what is the harm in trying? Asked Bhagirath. Ayurvati opened the pouch to find a reddish-brown thick paste. She had never seen anything like it. She smelt the paste and immediately looked up at Bhagirath, stunned. Where did you get this? That doesn't matter. Use it. Ayurvati kept staring at Bhagirath. She had 100 questions running through her mind, but she had to do the most obvious thing first. She knew this paste would save Parvateshwar. Parvateshwar opened his eyes slowly, his breathing ragged. My friend, whispered Shiva. My lord, whispered Parvateshwar, trying to get up. No, don't, said Shiva, gently making Parvateshwar lie back. You need to rest. You are strong-headed, but not that strong. Parvateshwar smiled wanly. Shiva knew the question that would arise first in the general's mind. All the Brangas are safe. What you did was brilliant. I don't know, my lord. I will have to do penance. I have committed a sin. What you did saved lives. There is no need for any penance. Parvateshwar sighed. His head still throbbed immensely. They had some ghastly rituals going on. Don't think about it, my friend. Right now you need to relax. Ayurvati has ordered strictly that nobody is to disturb you. I will leave you alone. Try to catch some sleep. Anandamayi! Bhagirath tried to stop his sister. Anandamayi was rushing into the Ayur Alay chamber where Parvateshwar lay. She had been out of the city the whole day, attending a music lesson at a nearby ashram. She ran into her brother's arms. Is he all right? Yes, said Bhagirath. Anandamayi glowered. Who is the bastard who did this? I hope you killed that dog. We will let Parvateshwar decide what to do. I heard he was hit on the temple, that there was blood hemorrhaging. Yes. Lord Agni be merciful, that can be fatal. Yes, but some medicines from the Brangas have saved him. Brangas? Firstly, they nearly kill him and then give medicines to save him. Is there no limit to their madness? The medicine was given by their leader Devodas. He arrived in Kashi a few hours back and heard about this incident. He seems like a good man. Anandamayi was not interested in the Branga leader. Has Parvateshwar woken up? Yes, the Lord Nilkant just met him. He has gone back to sleep. He is out of danger, don't worry. Anandamayi nodded, her eyes moist. And by the way, said Bhagirath, I have also recovered from my injuries. Anandamayi burst out laughing. I am sorry, my brother, I should have asked. Bhagirath made a dramatic pose. Nobody can hurt your brother. He is the greatest Chandravanshi warrior ever. Nobody hurt you because you must have been hiding behind Parvateshwar. Bhagirath burst out laughing and reached out playfully to chuck his sister. Anandamayi pulled her younger brother into her arms. Go, said Bhagirath. Looking at him may make you feel better. Anandamayi nodded. As she entered Parvateshwar's room, Ayurvati emerged from another chamber. Your Highness. Yes, Lady Ayurvati, said Bhagirath with a namaste. The Lord Nilkant and I would like to talk to you. Could you come with me? Of course. Where did you get the medicine from, Bhagirath? Asked Shiva. Bhagirath was surprised at Shiva's tone. The Lord had always appeared kind. He now seemed cold, angry. What is the matter, my lord? Asked Bhagirath, worried. Answer my question, Prince. Where did you get the medicine from? From the Brangas. Shiva stared hard into Bhagirath's eyes. Bhagirath could gauge the Nilkant was struggling to believe his words. I am not lying, my lord, said Bhagirath. And why would I? This medicine has saved the general's life. Shiva continued to stare. My lord, what is the problem? The problem, your highness, said Ayurvati, is that this medicine is not available in the Sapta Sindhu. I could tell that it was made from the bark of the Sanjeevani tree, but the problem with any Sanjeevani medicine is that it deteriorates rapidly. It cannot be used unless freshly taken from a live tree. This medicine was stabilized. It was a paste. We could use it. My apologies, Lady Ayurvati, but I still do not understand the problem. There is only one element, the crushed wood of another specific tree, which is capable of mixing with the Sanjeevani and stabilizing it. That tree does not grow in the Sapta Sindhu. Bhagirath frowned. The tree only grows south of the Narmada river in Naga territory. The Prince of Ayodhya froze. He knew what the Nilkant was thinking. My lord, I have nothing to do with the Nagas. I got this medicine from the Branga leader Divodas. I swear on Ayodhya, I swear on my beloved sister, I have nothing to do with the Nagas. Shiva continued to stare at Bhagirath. I want to meet Divodas. My lord, I swear I have nothing to do with the Nagas. Get me Divodas within the next hour, Prince Bhagirath. Bhagirath's heart was beating madly. My lord, please believe me. We will talk about this later, Prince Bhagirath, said Shiva. Please get Divodas. I believe King Atithigva has already arranged for Divodas to have an audience with you tomorrow morning, my lord. Shiva stared at Bhagirath, eyes narrowing a bit. I will arrange for Divodas to come here right away, my lord, said Bhagirath, rushing from the room. Anandamayi sat silently on a chair next to Parvateshwar's bed. The general was asleep, breathing slowly. The princess ran her fingers slowly down Parvateshwar's powerful shoulder, arm, and all over to his fingers. The general's body seemed to shiver a bit. Anandamayi laughed softly. For all your vows, you are a man after all. As if driven by instinct, Parvateshwar withdrew his hand. He blabbered something in his sleep, the voice not clear enough to reach Anandamayi's ears. She leaned forward. I will never break my vow, father. That is my Dasharath promise. I will never break my vow. A Dasharath promise, named after a vow that Lord Ram's father had once taken, was an open-ended word of honor that could never be broken. Anandamayi shook her head and sighed. Parvateshwar was repeating his vow of brahmacharya or eternal celibacy once again. I will never break my vow. Anandamayi smiled. We'll see. My lord, said Divodas, immediately bending to touch the Nilkant's feet. Ayushman Bhava, Divodas, said Shiva, blessing the man with a long life. Such an honor to meet you, my lord. The dark days are over. You will solve all our problems. We can go home. Go home? You still want to go back? Branga is my soul, my lord. I would never have left my homeland if it weren't for the plague. Shiva frowned, before coming to the point that concerned him. You are a good man, Divodas. You saved my friend's life, even at your own cost.
It was a matter of honor, my lord. I know all that happened. General Parvateshwar saved my tribe from certain death. We had to return the favor, and there was no cost to me. That depends on you, my friend. Remember your code of honor when you answer this.
Devodas frowned. How did you get the Naga medicine? Asked Shiva. Devodas froze. Answer me, Devodas, repeated Shiva gently. My lord, I know that medicine could only be made by the Nagas. The question, Devodas, is how you came by it. Devodas did not want to lie to the Nilkant, yet he was afraid of speaking the truth. Devodas, be truthful, said Shiva. Nothing angers me more than lies. Speak the truth. I promise you that you will not be harmed. It is the Nagas I seek. My lord, I don't know if I can. My tribe needs the medicines every year. You saw the chaos that a few days of delay led to. They will die without it, my lord. Tell me where to find those scum. I give you my word. I will get you the medicines every year. My lord, it is my word, Devodas, you will always have your medicine, even if it's the only thing I do for the rest of my life. Nobody in your tribe will die for the lack of medicine. Devodas hesitated. Then his faith in the Nilkant legend overcame his fear of the unknown. I have never met a Naga, my lord. Many of us believe that they have put a curse on Branga. The plague peaks every year without fail during the summer. The only medicine that can save us are the ones the Nagas supply. King Chandraketu gives the Nagas untold amounts of gold and a large supply of men in return for the medicines. Shiva was stunned. You mean King Chandraketu is forced to deal with the Nagas? He is their hostage. He is a virtuous king, my lord. Even the few of us who have escaped and found refuge outside Branga are given gold by him to sustain ourselves. We go back to Branga every year to get the medicines. Shiva stayed silent. Devodas had a smidgen of moisture in his eyes. Our king is a great man, my lord. He has made a deal with the devils and cursed his own soul only to save the people of Branga. Shiva nodded slowly. Is the king only one who deals with the Nagas? For what I know, he and a few trusted advisors, my lord, nobody else. Once my child is born, we will leave for Branga. I will need you to accompany me. My lord? Cried Devodas in shock. We cannot bring any non-Branga into our land. Our secrets must remain within our borders. My tribe's future is at stake. My land's future is at stake. This is much bigger than you, your tribe, or me. This is about India. We must find the Nagas. Devodas gazed at Shiva, torn and confused. I believe I can help, Devodas, said Shiva. Is this a life worth leading? Desperately begging for the medicines every year, not even knowing what ails your tribe. We have to solve this problem. I can do it, but not without your help. My lord, Devodas, think. I have heard that peacock blood has many other side effects that are just as bad. What if you had not reached in time with the Naga medicines? What would have happened to your tribe, your wife, your unborn child? Don't you want this resolved once and for all? Devodas nodded slowly. Then take me to your kingdom. We will free your king and the land of Branga from the clutches of the Naga. Yes, my lord. I swear I have nothing to do with the Nagas, my lord, said Bhagirath, his head bowed. Nandi, standing at the door,
of Shiva's chamber was looking on sympathetically. I swear, my lord, I would never go against you, said Bhagirath. Never. I know, said Shiva. I think the presence of the medicine shook me. Nandi has already spoken to me. I know how you came by the medicine. My apologies that I doubted you. My lord, cried Bhagirath, you don't need to apologize. No, Bhagirath, if I have made a mistake, I must apologize. I will not doubt you again. My lord, said Bhagirath. Shiva pulled Bhagirath close and embraced him. Thank you once again for gracing us with your presence, my lord, said Kanakhala, the Meluhan Prime Minister, bowing down to touch the great sage Maharishi Bhrigu's feet. I will take your leave. Ayushman Bhava, my child, said Bhrigu with a slight smile. Kanakhala was astonished at the sudden appearance of the reclusive Maharishi in Devagiri, the capital city of Meluha. But her emperor, Daksha, did not seem the least bit surprised. Kanakhala knew how the strict Saptarishi Uttaradhikari, a successor to the 7 great sages, liked to live. She had organized his chamber to be exactly like the Himalayan cave that was Bhrigu's home. No furniture except for a stone bed on which Bhrigu was sitting presently. Cold water had been sprinkled on the floor and the walls to stimulate the uncomfortable, chilly and damp atmosphere of the mountains. Light had been restricted through the presence of thick curtains on all the windows. A bowl of fruit had been placed in the room, the only food for the sage for days. And most importantly, an idol of Lord Brahma had been installed on an indentation in the wall at the north end of the chamber. Bhrigu waited for Kanakhala to leave before turning to Daksha, speaking in a calm, mellifluous voice. Are you sure about this, Your Highness? Daksha was sitting on the floor at Bhrigu's feet. Yes, my lord, it is for my grandchild. I have never been surer of anything in the world. Bhrigu smiled slightly, but his eyes were unhappy. Your Highness, I have seen many kings forget their dharma in their love for their child. I hope your obsession with your daughter doesn't make you forget your duty to your nation. No, my lord, Sati is the most important person in the world to me, but I will not forget my duties towards the cause. Good. That is the reason I supported you in becoming emperor. I know, my lord, nothing is more important than the cause. Nothing is more important than India. You don't think your son-in-law is intelligent enough to start asking questions when he sees it? No, my lord. He loves my daughter. He loves India. He will not do anything to hurt the cause. The Vasudevs have begun to influence him, Your Highness. Daksha looked shocked, at a loss for words. Bhrigu realized the futility of carrying on this conversation. Daksha was too simple-minded to understand the implications. He would have to fight for the cause by himself. Please go ahead then, if that is what you believe, said Bhrigu. But you are not to answer any question on where it came from to anyone. Is that clear? Daksha nodded. He was still shocked by the statement Bhrigu had made about Shiva and the Vasudevs. Not even to your daughter, Your Highness, said Bhrigu. Yes, my lord. Bhrigu nodded. He breathed deeply. This was troubling. He would have to find hard to save the legacy. It was imperative. He believed the very future of India was at stake. There is nothing to fear in any case, my lord, said Daksha, feigning a brilliance he didn't quite feel. Whatever may have happened with Brahaspati, the secret is safe. It will remain alive for centuries. India will continue to prosper and rule the world. Brahaspati was a fool, said Vrigu, his voice rising. Even worse, maybe he was a traitor to the cause. Daksha kept quiet. As always, he was afraid of Brigu's temper. Brigu calmed down. I can't believe I even considered giving my disciple Tara to him in marriage. The poor girl's life would have been destroyed. Where is Tara, Your Highness? I hope she is safe and happy. She is safe. I have kept her in the land of Lord Rudra. Some of them remain true to me. As for happiness, Brigu shook his head warily. She still loves him. Stupidly so, even though he is no more. No point in talking about Brahaspati, said Daksha. Thank you so much for your permission, my lord. From the deepest corner of my heart, thank you. Brigu nodded, bending lower and whispering, Remain careful, Your Highness. The war is not over. Don't think that you are the only one who can use the Nilkant. Chapter 7 Birth Pangs. Shiva stood at the edge of the Dashashamedh Ghat in a royal enclosure. On his side stood their highnesses Dilipa and Atithigva, with other key members of the nobility behind them. The citizens of Kashi stood away from the enclosure. They were not overexcited. They had got used to the constant attention that came the way of their city since the Nilkant had made it his temporary home. It was a busy day for Kashi's diplomatic staff. Dilipa had arrived just that morning. The standard protocols for the Emperor of Swadweep had been followed, right down to the single white flag at the royal enclosure with the Chandravanshi crescent moon darned on it. Now they were waiting for Daksha, the Emperor of India. The protocol had been tricky, but they had finally decided to have a red Suryavanshi flag placed at the highest enclosure. After all, Lord Nilkant had declared Daksha the Emperor of all of India. Bowing to the sensitivities of Dilipa, Kashi protocol officers had also placed a Chandravanshi flag in the enclosure at a slightly lower height as compared to the Suryavanshi flag. Shiva, of course, did not really care about the ceremonies. He was more interested in the workers busy at the temporary shipyard across the river where the Brangas, led by Divodas himself, had been furiously working away for the last 3 months. Given the superstition about not living on the eastern side of the Ganga's meander, it was naturally the safest place for the Brangas to do their job. They had been constructing special ships that could sail through the great gates of Branga, massive barriers across the main river access to their land. Shiva couldn't imagine how barricades could be built in a river as broad as the Ganga. But Divodas had said that these special ships would be required. Shiva remembered telling a skeptical Atithigva who had opposed this move of the Brangas. Just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But Atithigva had refused the usage of the royal palace and grounds on the eastern bank as a shipyard. So the Brangas worked on a dangerous recently dried stretch of the river bank. Divodas had begun work the very next day after promising the Nilkant that he would accompany him to Branga. Divodas had been true to his word. He is a good man. The sound of Daksha's ship finally docking at the ghat brought Shiva back from his thoughts. He saw the rope pulley lowering the walkway. Daksha, without caring for royal protocol, immediately bounded onto the walkway and almost ran to Shiva. He bowed low and spoke breathlessly. "Is it a boy, my lord?" Shiva stood up to welcome the Emperor of India, did a formal namaste, and spoke with a smile. "We still don't know, Your Highness. She's not due till tomorrow." "Oh, wonderful. I have not been late then. I was very scared that I would miss this joyous day." Shiva laughed out loud. It was difficult to say who was more excited, the father or the grandfather. "Such a delight to meet you again, Purvaka-ji," said Shiva, rising from his chair and bending down to touch the blind man's feet. The suffix ji was a form of respect. Purvaka, Drapaku's blind father, was the same Vikarma whose blessings Shiva had sought at Kotwar in Meluha a few years ago. Kotwar residents had been stunned by the Nilkant's public rejection of the Vikarma law. Leave alone finding the touch of a Vikarma polluting, Shiva had actually sought to be blessed by one. Purvaka had come along in Emperor Daksha's convoy to Kashi. He immediately stepped back as though sensing what Shiva was about to do. "No, my lord, you are the Nilkant. How can I allow you to touch my feet?" "Why not, Purvaka-ji?" asked Shiva. "But my lord, how can you touch my father's feet?" said Drapaku. "You are the Mahadev." "Isn't it my choice as to whose feet I touch?" asked Shiva. Turning back to Purvaka, Shiva continued, "You are elder to me. You cannot deny me the right to seek your blessings. So please do so quickly. My back is hurting for bending so long." Purvaka laughed, placing his hand on Shiva's head. "Nobody can refuse you, Great One. Ayushman Bhava." Shiva rose, satisfied with the blessing for a long life. "So you intend to spend your time with your son now?" "Yes, my lord." "But we would be going on a dangerous voyage. Are you sure?" "I was once a warrior too, my lord. I still have the strength. I can kill any naga who stands in front of me." Shiva smiled, turning towards Drapaku, his eyebrows raised. Drapaku smiled back, signaling with his hand that he would protect his father. "My boy, don't think I cannot sense what you're saying," said Purvaka. "I may be blind, but you learn to wield the sword holding my hands. I will protect myself, and you as well." Both Shiva and Drapaku burst out laughing. Shiva was delighted to see that the diffident Purvaka he had met at Kotwar, a man who had suppressed his natural valor in a defeatist manner against the assaults of fate, was rediscovering his old fire. "Forget about your son," said Shiva. "I would be delighted to have you as my bodyguard." "I am scared, Shiva." Sati was sitting on her bed in their chamber. Shiva had just entered the room with a plate full of food. Much to the horror of the royal cook, the Nilkant had insisted on cooking for his wife himself. Pretending to be hurt, Shiva said, "My cooking isn't that bad." Sati burst out laughing. "That's not what I meant." Shiva came closer and smiled. Setting the plate aside on the table, he caressed her face. "I know. I have insisted on Ayurvati overseeing the delivery. She's the best doctor in the world. Nothing will go wrong." "But what if this child too is stillborn? What if my past life sins affect our poor child?"
There are no past life sins, Sati. There is only this life. That is the only reality. Everything else is a theory. Believe the theory that gives you peace and reject the one that causes you pain. Why believe in a theory if it causes you unhappiness? You have done all you can to take care of your child and yourself. Now have faith. Sati kept quiet, her eyes still mirroring the foreboding she felt inside. Shiva ran his hand along Sati's face again. My darling, trust me. Your worrying is not going to help. Just think positive and happy thoughts. That is the best you can do for our child. And leave the rest to fate. In any case, fate has ensured that you will lose your bet tomorrow. What bet? You can't wriggle out of it now, said Shiva. Seriously, what bet? That we will have a daughter. I had forgotten about that, smiled Sati, but I have a strong feeling it will be a son. Nah, laughed Shiva. Sati laughed along and rested her face against Shiva's hand. Shiva broke a piece of roti, wrapped some vegetables in it, and held out the morsel for Sati. Is the salt all right? Are there really past life sins? Asked Shiva. The Nilkant was in the Kashi Vishwanath temple. Seated in front of him was a Vasudev Pandit. The setting sun shone through the spaces between the temple pillars. The red sandstone shone even brighter, creating an awe-inspiring atmosphere. What do you think? Asked the Vasudev. I don't believe anything till I have seen the proof. For anything without proof, I think we should believe the theory that gives us peace. It doesn't matter whether the theory is true or not. That is a good strategy for a happy life, no doubt. Shiva waited for the Pandit to say more. When he didn't, Shiva spoke again. You still haven't answered my question. Are there really past life sins that we suffer for in this life? I didn't answer the question because I don't have the answer. But if people believe that sins of the past life can impact this life, won't they at least try to lead a better life this time around? Shiva smiled. Are these people just talented wordsmiths or great philosophers? The Pandit smiled back. Once again, I don't have the answer. Shiva burst out laughing. He had forgotten the Pandit could receive his thoughts and that he could in turn do the same with the Pandits. How does this work? How is that I can hear your thoughts? It's a very simple science, really. The science of radio waves. This is not a theory. The Pandit smiled. This is certainly not a theory. This is a fact. Just like light, which helps you see, there are radio waves to help you hear. While all humans can use the properties of light to see, most don't know how to use radio waves to hear. We are dependent on sound waves to hear. Sound waves travel much slower through the air and for much shorter distances. Radio waves travel far and fast, just like light. Shiva remembered his uncle, who he also thought could hear his thoughts. In his youth, he had thought it was magic. Now he knew better, that there was a science behind it. That's interesting. Then why can't you create a machine to convert radio waves into sound waves? Ah, that is a tough one. We haven't succeeded in that as yet, but we have succeeded in training our brains to pick up radio waves. It took years of practice to do it. That's why we were shocked that you could do it without any training. I got lucky, I guess. There is no luck, great one. You were born special. Shiva frowned.
I don't think so. In any case, how is it supposed to work? How do you pick up radio waves? Why can't I hear everyone's thoughts? It takes effort to be able to even transmit your thoughts clearly as radio waves. Many people do it unconsciously, even without training. But picking up radio waves and hearing other people's thoughts, that is completely different. It is not easy. We have to stay within the range of powerful transmitters. The temples. You are exceptionally intelligent, O Nilkant, smiled the Pandit. Yes, the temples work as our transmitters. Therefore, the temple we use have to have a height of at least 50 meters. This helps in catching radio waves from other Vasudevs and in turn transmitting my thoughts to them as well. You mean other Vasudevs are hearing us all the time, Panditji? Yes, whoever chooses to hear our conversation, and very few Vasudevs would choose not to hear the savior of our times, great Nilkant. Shiva frowned. If what the Pandit was saying was true, then he could speak to any Vasudev at any of their temples across India right now. Then tell me this, O Vasudev of the Magadha temple. What did you mean by saying that people are attached to evil? Shiva heard a loud laugh. It appeared to be coming from a distance. The Vasudev Pandit of the Narsimha temple at Magadha. You are too smart, Lord Nilkant. Shiva smiled. I would prefer answers to flattery, great Vasudev. Silence. Then Shiva heard the voice from the Magadha clearly. I really liked your speech at the Dharmakhet war. Har Har Mahadev. All of us are Mahadev. There is a God in every single one of us. What a beautiful thought. What does that have to do with my question? I asked why people should be attached to evil. It does. It very profoundly does. There is a God in every single one of us. What is the obvious corollary? That it is the responsibility of every single one of us to discover the God within. No, my friend, that is the moral. I asked what the corollary was. I don't understand, Panditji. Everything needs balance, Nilkant. The masculine needs the feminine. The energy requires the mass. So think, Har Har Mahadev. What is the corollary? What balances this statement? Shiva frowned. A thought occurred to him. He didn't like it. The Vasudev of Ayodhya urged Shiva. Don't stop your thoughts, my friend. Free flow is the only way to discover the truth. Shiva grimaced. But this cannot be true. Truth doesn't have to be liked. It only has to be spoken. Speak it out. The truth may hurt you, but it will set you free. But I can't believe this. The truth doesn't ask for belief. It just exists. Let me hear what you think. There is a God in every single one of us. What is the obvious corollary? There is evil in every single one of us. Exactly. There is a God in every single one of us, and there is evil in every single one of us. The true battle between good and evil is fought within. And the great evil connects itself to the evil within us. Is that why people get attached to it? I believe that when you discover the great evil of our times, you will not need any explanation about how it attaches itself so deeply to us. Shiva stared at the Panditji in front of him. The conversation had shaken him. His task was not just to discover evil. That would probably be easy. How would he get people to give up their attachment to evil? You don't have to find all the answers now, my friend. said the Kashi Vasudev. Shiva smiled weakly, uneasy. Then he heard the distant voice of someone he didn't recognize. A commanding voice, a voice that appeared to be used to being powerful, strong, yet calm. The medicine. Of course, said the Kashi Pandit as he got up quickly. He was back in no time with a small silk pouch. Shiva frowned. Apply this on your wife's belly, my friend, said the Kashi Pandit. Your child will be born healthy and strong. What is this? Its identity doesn't matter. What matters is that it will work. Shiva opened the pouch. There was a thick reddish-brown paste inside. Thank you. If this ensures my child's safety, I will be forever grateful to you. The voice that Shiva had not recognized, the one that had ordered the Kashi Vasudev, spoke. You don't need to be grateful, Lord Nilkant. It is our duty and honor to be of any assistance to you. Jai Guru Vishwamitra, Jai Guru Vashisht. Shiva was at the window from the height of the palace walls. He could see the congested city and beyond that the wide sacred avenue. On its edge, close to the Brahma Ghat, stood the mighty Vishwanath temple. Shiva was staring at it, his hands clasped together in prayer. Lord Rudra, take care of my child. Please, let nothing go wrong. He turned around as he heard a soft cough. The most important people in India were waiting with bated breath for news of Sati and Shiva's child. Daksha was fidgeting nervously, deeply afraid. He is truly concerned about Sati. Whatever else he may or may not be, he is a devoted father. An impassive Vidini was holding Daksha's hand. Emperor Dilipa sat quietly, watching his children, Bhagirath and Anandamayi, who were in an animated but soft conversation. Dilipa kept staring at Bhagirath. Parvateshwar, who had recovered completely from his injuries in the past 3 months, stood strong at a corner of the chamber. King Adithigva paced up and down the room, upset that his own doctors had not been given the honor to deliver the Nilkant's firstborn. But Shiva was not about to take chances. Only Ayurvati would do. Shiva turned around. He saw Nandi standing near the wall and gestured with his eyes. Yes, my lord? Asked Nandi, coming up to Shiva. I feel so helpless, Nandi. I am nervous. Give me a moment, my lord. Nandi rushed out of the chamber. He was back with Veerbhadra. Both friends went up to the window. This one is good, said Veerbhadra. Really? Asked Shiva. Veerbhadra lit the chillum and gave it to Shiva, who took a deep puff. Whispered Shiva. Yes? I am still nervous. Veerbhadra started laughing. What do you hope it will be? A girl. A girl? Sure. A girl can't be a warrior. What nonsense. Look at Sati. Veerbhadra nodded. Fair point. And the name? Kritika. Kritika? You don't have to do this for me, my friend. I am not doing it for you, you fool, said Shiva. If I wanted to do that, I would name my daughter Bhadra. I am doing it for Kritika and Sati. Kritika has been a rock of support in my wife's life. I want to celebrate that. Veerbhadra smiled. She's a good woman, isn't she? That she is. You have done well. Hey, she hasn't done so badly either. I am not that terrible a husband. Actually, she could have done better. Bhadra playfully slapped Shiva on his wrist As both friends shared a quiet laugh, Shiva handed the chilam back to Veerbhadra. Suddenly, the door to the inner chamber opened. Ayurvati rushed out to Shiva. "It's a boy, my lord! A strong, handsome, powerful boy!" Shiva picked up Ayurvati in his arms and swung her around, laughing heartily. "A boy will also do." Setting an embarrassed Ayurvati back to the ground, Shiva rushed into the inner chamber. Ayurvati stopped everyone else from entering. Sati was on the bed. Two nurses were hovering close by. Kritika was sitting on a chair next to Sati, holding her hand. The most beautiful baby that Shiva had ever seen was next to Sati. He had been wrapped tight in a small white cloth and was sleeping soundly. Sati smiled softly. "It's a boy. Looks like I won, darling." "That's true," whispered Shiva, scared of touching his hand. "But I haven't lost anything." Sati laughed, but immediately quietened down, the stitches hard. "What do we call him? We certainly cannot call him Kritika." "Yes, this is out of the question," smiled Sati's handmaiden. "Kritika is a woman's name." "But I still want him named after you, Kritika," said Shiva. "I agree," said Sati. "But what can that name be?" Shiva thought for a moment. "I know. We will call him Kartik."